This committee of the whole meeting of April the 7th is called to order. I'd like to introduce Kerri Wall, the introduction updates from as a community health facilitator for East Kootenay and Kootenay boundary. Sorry, apologies, long weekend. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda of the committee of the whole meeting of April 7th? All in favor? So carried. Now moving right back again. We have Kerri Wall as the community health facilitator for East Kootenay and Kootenay boundary, and we'd like the council to receive the presentation from Kerri Wall of Interior Health. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Thank you, Council. I appreciate being here today to present to Grand Forks. I haven't met the new council yet. I presented to the old council. Thank you. I'm going to give you an update today about the Healthy Communities Initiative and tell you what kind of things I do, what kind of things I have done with the City of Grand Forks, and pose questions about what we might do in the future. And I just mostly wanted to introduce myself, talk to you about the work that I do. So a bit about me. I live in Fernie. I'm based out of the Fernie Health Unit, but I cover the territory of IH East, which is basically the East and West Kootenays and extends out here to Grand Forks. And I travel around a lot. I work with municipalities. I do healthy public policy. So basically, I help bring health expertise, a health lens, health eyes towards municipal planning. I work with municipalities all over the Kootenays. Interior Health is committed to collaborate with municipalities to create policies and environments that support good health. Although most of the work Interior Health does is on the sick care end of things, looking after sick people, and in the healthcare end, we do some preventative work, and that's where I come in, and the Healthy Communities Initiative, helping to keep healthy people healthy for longer. We're very interested in supporting the kind of work that local governments do, because local governments are all about creating healthy places for healthy citizens to thrive. It makes a lot of sense to do work at this end of the spectrum, at the make sure got one pending with Creston and Golden and Castlegar as well. So some of the things local government does that helps improve community health, I'm sure you've already thought of many, but recreation planning and recreation policies are huge. Having walkability, trails, access for people to get around on their own steam, that increases physical activity levels, which increases health a lot. Anything to do with agricultural planning or food policies, social planning, housing, affordable housing, poverty strategies, bylaws for smoke-free spaces like I've got on this list. That's the sort of thing that communities and I have been working on all around the region. I've been doing some poverty reduction planning with the City of Nelson and the City of Cranbrook. Did a very exciting assessment last year with the City of Nelson, a food security assessment, to determine where can we put in more community gardens, how are our community gardens being used, what is the need, what is the demand, and I was involved in the advisory committee for that, which was a really great project. The City of Golden, the City of Trail consulted with me about recreation planning for the future, 10-year planning ahead. What kind of needs do you see? What kind of gaps are we, do you see? Are we missing anything? Let's partner together to plan for this kind of stuff. I helped Golden with their vital signs report also, bringing them some health information and health data and a health lens to the whole planning. So there's so many different options of things that we could do together if we wanted to move forward. So we have to offer myself. I'm a dedicated community health facilitator working exclusively with local governments. It's my job to talk to you guys. That's what I do 5 days a week. I've got a phone number where I'm easily reached and an email address. I know sometimes interior health can seem like a very large, monolithic institution. Who do I talk to? Who did I talk to last time? But that's not how I work. I get calls all the time from counselors. Hey, I want to talk to you about this thing, or can we meet for coffee? And that's my job. So I'm very happy to consult on anything, any questions you have or ideas you have. As well, there's a lot of other teams behind me. I've got access to the Healthy Built Environment team, the medical health officers, the community nutritionists, tobacco reduction coordinators, and more. So although I'm a point of contact, we've got other area expertise I can bring. External supports that we've got, BC Healthy Community Society works with Plan H, and basically through the Ministry of Health. The City of Grand Forks applied last year for a $5,000 grant from the Plan H BC Healthy Communities Capacity Building Grants to put towards the vital sign planning, and that application I helped with, and it was successful and received. So that's great. There's going to be more Plan H money announced coming up this year, but I'm not sure when. They haven't said when, but we were thinking it would be sometime this spring, just before the summer. So I'm not sure, but as soon as I know anything about any possible funding, I let all the communities I work with know. And of course, the Healthy Families BC has other resources. They put together last year a whole series of community health profiles, and I brought a bunch of them today for Grand Forks. These came out last year. They're 14-page documents all about health data for the City of Grand Forks. And I'm happy to leave these with everybody and pass them around. So that came from the Ministry of Health also. So I can help with things like that. Plan H also put out these really great full-color documents. Some of you might have seen these, but I can leave them as well. They have this, how do local governments improve health and community well-being, which is a great pamphlet. Plan H stuff, the brand Plan H, planh.ca, is specifically for local governments in BC. It's for staff, councillors, mayors, in towns and communities all across the province to think about community planning from a health lens. So they also have this one, Healthy Eating and Food Security. If you're interested, I can leave these documents. And that's all I have to say, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to hear them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or discussion from council? Councillor Hammond.
Just curious, will that PowerPoint be available that you could email to the councillors?
Yes, absolutely. I left it with staff and they have it.
Okay. Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Ross.
Thank you. What an amazing delivery. Thank you. That's great. And I am really interested if you could please leave those documents. How do you make people eat in a more healthy way? Because I think food is medicine. And, we have the knowledge. It's sort of general. So, how do we, because we live in a breadbasket here.
Right.
And I'm just wondering do you have an experience with that? Is there an education program that we can actually ramp up?
I don't
You
know.
talked about local food.
Right,
It's in your, your
right.
first slide.
Yes. I personally don't know of any education programs, although the community nutritionist who works in this area, she's my colleague Tara Stark, she knows more, that's her job to know about nutrition. She works out of the office in Nelson. But I would say that it seems like the easy way to get people to eat healthier from a municipal planning level is to make it easier for food to be accessible. If you had a community food charter, if you do have farmers market, I know there's a community garden happening behind the aquatic center, which is really exciting. The more you can talk as a city about how important you think it is, we can help with some marketing or education ideas, I know that, and make it something that gets talked about, that's visible, that's accessible, that's easy, and more people will eat healthy. But it is complex, because I know there's a lot of personal lifestyle questions, psychology, childhood experiences that all go into that.
Councillor Hammond.
In Trail, I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, they did a pilot project, and I'm just wondering if you're familiar with it and how it went, where they had the businesses downtown put out planter boxes,
Right.
and so they had basically community gardens spread out throughout the entire city core.
Right.
So anybody could go by at any time and take whatever they wanted out of
Yes.
the veggie gardens. Interesting to find out how that went. Was it maintained and looked after?
I think it was called Incredible Trail, wasn't it? Like edible trail, Incredible Trail. And I haven't spoken to them about it, but I've been following that on Facebook, and I'm very curious about it because that Incredible Trail has a Facebook page.
Okay.
So I'm really wondering. I think they're doing it again this year.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great question, and that's another thing that municipalities can do. I know the city of Kamloops has extensive public produce space just in front of their city hall. Like, they grow stuff and people can come and take it. It's neat to show that the city
Yeah.
thinks it's important when you do that yourself on your own property.
Yeah. That's cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from council? Any questions from the gallery? Okay.
Motion to receive?
Yes, do I have a motion to receive the presentation from Kerri Wall? Councillor Wershagen? Councillor Thompson? All in favor? So carried. Thank you, Ms. Wall. Up next, we have Cindy Crane as the Acute Health Services Manager for Grand Forks. Welcome, Ms. Crane.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad and Council. Really nice to be here again with Kerri, my colleague. So my name is Cindy Crane, and I am the site manager here in Grand Forks at the Acute Hospital, which also we have our residential facility for review and others. So I'm just here to give you an IHA update, just to let you know a little bit about how we're doing. So I'll just get my clicker here. So this is actually a really nice pictorial. One thing that always is incredible to me is the annual budget of Interior Health is actually $1.9 billion. And we do have a lot of programs that are not only just a hospital based, but residential, community care, mental health. We have some of our environmental, and then as Kerri was talking about, our health promotion activities. So this just gives you a really nice picture of all the different things that we do and how we are allied with things like volunteers, like almost 5,000 volunteers work within our programs here, certainly. So it's just to give you an idea. We have an organizational structure that does divide some of our services, and just so that you know some of the contacts in case you are wanting to ask questions, I am the community liaison for Grand Forks, Midway, also Greenwood and Rock Creek. So I am the community liaison as well as the site manager. Bridget McDonough, her office is in Nelson, but she has all three acute hospitals, Nelson, Trail, and Grand Forks here in the Boundary and Kootenay Boundary area. Cheryl Whittleton, she may have presented here to Grand Forks Council before. She has all of the community programs in the Kootenay Boundary. Cindy Kozak-Campbell is director of and administrator of all the residential care facilities in Kootenay Boundary, and then you have met Kerri Wall. So that's just an outline of the different individuals within our program. So this slide sort of speaks to something that all of us at some point as we age will end up often with one chronic disease. And it gives a pictorial of how we compare here in Grand Forks to IH and also to British Columbia. And when I did this presentation last time, again, these stats have been updated, it's 1 year newer, but you can see that depression and anxiety, Grand Forks is a little bit higher. And you can see how we compare on some of the other things like asthma, COPD, dementia, and heart failure. So one thing that I did sort of look into after looking at this slide is often the depression and anxiety shows up because people with chronic disease do experience that as well as another chronic disease. So I don't think it should alarm you, but it is interesting that it is often accompanying yet another chronic disease. This gives you another idea about what our population projection is and where our bulge is, which really here in Grand Forks, because we are primarily a retirement community, our bulge is really in that roughly sort of 50 to 70 year age. So this is just a pictorial to show you where we're at with our demographics. And as Kerri was speaking, really our Ministry of Health is really trying to push us from a reactive type of healthcare system to a proactive. And certainly all of the work that Kerri and others do in the community with prevention and health promotion is really important to keeping people out of acute hospitals such as we have here in Grand Forks and elsewhere. So a few new programs that have been piloted over the last year and a half really are addressing some of the chronic disease, and I'm just going to speak briefly about two of them. One of them is Breathe Well, that is actually based in Trail currently, and then what our surveillance nurses do. So Breathe Well has many different programs, and when I was director in Penticton, there was a program there as well. And what Breathe Well is about is actually addressing the chronic long-term respiratory condition called chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So this is people that often are on oxygen, have a lot of difficulty breathing just on a normal basis. And this is a 10-week program that they attend to help them cope and stay longer at home and not be hospitalized. We've only had 3 people from Grand Forks attend the program in Trail to date, but again, we've had very positive responses to it, and I think this will continue to grow for those that can travel to Trail. And you can see the cost of patients that are in the Breathe Well program. It shows that they can stay home. It's only $26 per day versus something more expensive such as an emergency visit or hospitalization. And that's just a quote from one of the patients there. Another interesting program that's only been piloted for the last year is a surveillance nurse program. Again, this is for the more senior individuals that want to stay in their homes, and what these nurses do is they call in to these patients in their home setting and ensure that they've got all the correct community programs. They call about once every 2 or 3 months, and they just do a check-in and also help support them if there's anything else that we can do from Interior Health or community programs to keep them in their own home settings. So this is a new program. It again has been very well received. One thing that some of you or some of your family members may have used is our now Regional Cardiac Services Program in Kelowna. We are very happy that we have this program here in Interior Health now, because it does save many patients in Interior Health from having to go to Victoria or Vancouver and have lengthy hospital stays awaiting that. To date in Kelowna, there have been 1,100 open heart surgeries, which is absolutely incredible. And they continue with a lot of angioplasties, or what's called interventional surgery, there as well. And I will tell you, I'm just going to go back, my own husband, who happens to be here, is one of those patients who had interventional cardiac surgery, and I just found it, having worked at Kelowna myself, just really a wonderful program that can allow us to not travel so incredibly far all the way to Vancouver or Victoria. And they are state-of-the-art, very proud of this Interior Health Regional program. And in fact, the one time in the cardiac cath lab, we live here in Grand Forks, and there was yet another Grand Forks residence in the cath lab suite. So there was 2 people from Grand Forks, and so that's really incredible for our city here. Another really profiled response team that we have is called the HEART team, and these are road transport nurses, so they do not go in the air, but they are interfacility transport nurses and RTs that can move a patient that's critically ill from our emergency department here in Grand Forks, possibly to Kelowna or to Trail, which are our regional centers for higher level of care. We have 4 teams currently in Interior Health, and we use 2 of them here in Grand Forks. The HEART team from Trail, or at times the HEART team from Penticton, come to pick up our patients here in Grand Forks if they need road transport. And as you know, we had an incredible donation from a local family, the Clifton family, of almost $200,000 for our new heliport, which is currently on our hospital grounds. It has been incredible to have this service because we do have air transport from BC Ambulance that can helicopter a critically ill patient often to Kelowna for either cardiac or high or very critical trauma care. Again, it has been a really nice addition to our facility here, and we're very lucky to have it because other hospitals within Kootenay boundaries, such as Nelson with all their mountainous ranges, cannot have a heliport without about $1 million ticket to have that place there near their hospital. So we are very, very fortunate to have this heliport donated by the Clifton family, and that's actually just a picture of the ribbon cutting. So what do we do in our acute services? Many of you may have been on our acute floor, our 12 medical inpatient floor, or visited someone there. And we do have a very busy emergency department. In fact, the last fiscal year, we have increased our emergency visits by 5%. And it's more than any other Kootenay boundary hospital. Typically, nowadays, emergency visits go up by 1 or 2%. We have increased by 5%, so we're seeing about 1,200 or 1,300 patients per month. So we are definitely a busy service in our emergency department. And as I want to point out, 2 of our other really important things are the cardiac stress testing that we're able to do here, and also our chemotherapy program, which is very, very busy and runs 3 to 4 days per week. Our community health services are listed here, and I know Kerri did mention a few of them, but certainly the nutrition and our mental health, we're going to speak about that as well. There's many different community care programs that are within our region here. Mental health, as you know, is a concern in all of our communities, and the last council meeting I was at, I wanted to sort of add a little bit more about what mental health and our substance use community programs do, because they do a number of different functions for us and really are supporting those mental health clients that are out in the community on medications, maybe struggling with housing, with other issues within their life. There's the clubhouse, which is very active. There's senior mental health services and also group therapy sessions. We also use our telehealth at the hospital for liaison with psychiatrists, and Trail and Nelson psychiatrists do come to Grand Forks to our community offices here and to the hospital to see mental health clients. So we are very fortunate to have those services here. Another really important program, because one of the chronic diseases that touches many of us, especially as we get older, is diabetes. And I am particularly proud of this program, which is a community program, but in our boundary hospital. And we have excellent dietitian that's specific to diabetes, as well as a diabetic nurse educator. So here is that nutrition piece, because those individuals with diabetes certainly need to know about their nutrition, and we do have those resources. It's very easy to get a referral, and they do have group sessions as well to provide information about nutrition and also diabetic care. And one new addition since this January is now currently within the boundary area, we do have a nurse practitioner, and she is located in an office in Rock Creek. She is available to those individuals in that area or those that would want to travel to see a nurse practitioner. And these are specially higher trained, university trained nurses. And Celia Evanson is our nurse practitioner. I actually had a meeting with her last week, Wednesday. She comes with a lot of experience. She has just moved here from up north and worked in an emergency setting and in primary care in a very busy Aboriginal community up there, and has tons of experience. So I think we are extremely lucky to have Celia join us. She actually did work during her nurse practitioner training in Grand Forks Emergency with our physicians. So our Grand Forks physicians know her and are all very happy that she is our nurse practitioner here for our boundary area. And one of our key partnerships really is the community here in Grand Forks, our auxiliary volunteers, and also Christina Lake. And I just wanted to highlight, because we did mention the cardiac program in Kelowna. About a year and a half ago, the single largest donation ever from the auxiliary to our hospital was for cardiac monitoring. So we have the state-of-the-art cardiac monitors that can monitor heart rhythms while you're in the trauma bay or at the bedside in real time, that can be seen by a cardiologist in Kelowna in the moment. So it is a really excellent heart monitoring system that we can share with those cardiologists that will make the determination if you need to come to Kelowna or not. And additionally, we did also have $42,000 subsequent to that donation for a new cardiac stress test machine from the Grand Forks Auxiliary. So often you have a cardiac stress test before you go to Kelowna to determine how significant your heart disease is. So that's up and running, and so we really do have some excellent equipment at our small rural hospital that we can provide to our community here. And I thank you for your attention and time, and I'll take any questions at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Hammond.
Thank you for your presentation. I think we have an amazing health facility here. I moved here from Vancouver, and I know that to see a specialist here or to get service here, you're in much quicker. And the services that we offer for a town this size, I think we're very fortunate. One thing, we as a city are trying to attract young families into our community. And so the only thing that I would see that we, from my perspective, that we're short of is a maternity ward. And I know we had one when I first moved here 10 years ago. The chemo unit is now taken over what used to be a maternity ward. It's hard to attract young families or keep young people in town when we don't have facilities for them to have their families here. Is there any plans for the future? It's like the chicken and the egg. We need the population in order for you to justify the expense of having it. But without having it, we can't draw those young families in.
Right. No, I see your point, but having been the director in Nelson that has the obstetrical program as well as Trail, it is difficult for those families to move here knowing that you don't have an obstetrician here. But it isn't really about having the programming here. You also need to have the physicians, the trained nurses, and keep that competence. So with a population this small, the number of deliveries per year would be limited. And that's where the skill and the expertise of the limited number of physicians here, as well as nurses, cannot be kept up to a standard that's high enough to develop. Really, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with a normal birth.
Right.
And then the additional piece of it really is that you need that pediatrician piece with the obstetrical service. So again, it's very difficult to support in a small community such as this, and it isn't just here that that doesn't have that service. I think the geography here has some challenges because, of course, I've lived in Fraser Health, and that area, I mean, hospitals are about 20 to 25 minutes away. It's not quite as big a jump to go to a service there. But unfortunately, here in Interior Health, we do have a lot of geography that works against us.
Councillor Krog.
Yeah, similar to what Councillor Hammond was talking about, so that part's been answered. And I guess just a comment, because I'm not 100% sure that everybody understands who and what the hospital auxiliary is and how they raise their funds, and these were some recent donations or newer donations, but they've been doing it for years, and
Absolutely.
it's mainly funded through the thrift store, which is downtown, and any donations to that thrift store and bringing in funds to help buy more equipment for the whole community, and I can't say enough about what they do, and that's why I support them as well, and take everything that I think is still usable
Yes.
to that thrift store across from Clyde's.
Councillor Ross?
Oh, okay, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on
I
that.
just wanted to comment, absolutely, and thank you for emphasizing that. They are truly our partners, because as the Ministry of Health is working with increasing healthcare budgets, what we find is our capital funding budget continues to shrink. So those items that need replacement, we're having to prioritize an extensive list, and sometimes your item that you think is most important might be second on the list and not first. So without our partners and all the work that they do with the thrift shop and us as community, bringing our items there for sale, I mean, truly, I can walk around the hospital and point out each item that they have actually purchased and which ones Interior Health have. And they are superseding really what our health authority is able to do. Their partnership here is integral to our hospital, absolutely, and residential, because they support residential as well.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you. Yeah, just thank you very much for your presentation. Just referring back to one of the graphs that you showed, you had on your PowerPoint, and looking at the high level of anxiety and depression that exists in Grand Forks, which seemed higher than the rest of BC, correct? Right.
Right.
And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on what sort of mental health, anxiety support do we have in Grand Forks when it indicates that we seem to have a higher need in this area?
Right. So I guess I'll just sort of start with clinical depression and or anxiety doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be seen by a mental health practitioner.
Right.
Right? So that's important to separate out. And again, as I mentioned, if you have a chronic illness such as chronic pain, or maybe you are on oxygen all the time and you struggle to breathe with COPD, often depression is almost another condition that the physician on their discharge diagnosis from hospital emergency will add that. So they may have COPD and depression because they're living with something that's very chronic and seems like it's never going to go away. So again, for clinical depression that needs a psychiatrist, certainly suicidal patients will see a psychiatrist. And we do have the psychiatrists that do come here from Nelson and Trail to our community services. GPs here and elsewhere can refer them to see a psychiatrist, and then they'll be handled in our community offices. And as well with some of our seniors that have an overriding mental health issue from maybe when they were 40, they had a mental health issue that has continued. Dr. McGee and others will come to our hospital and residential care to assess them and determine if any of their medications need to be altered. Because our GPs are very good at ordering these or continuing medication, but they will either telehealth to or do a telephone call to our psychiatrist for further advice.
Okay, and then how do you deal with people with severe addictions?
Addictions, we do have mental health and substance use. So there are programs that are provided. The Clubhouse is one of them. We do have mental health workers that are outreach workers that do liaise with these clients, and they are, again, this is the benefit of a small community, is very quickly people that move here because of the weather or the affordability get linked in very quickly to our mental health services. So it isn't very often that we will have a person come as a patient to our merge that has possibly what we believe is a mental health issue that isn't already linked into our mental health services here. And if we do, we refer them to our mental health partners.
So the Clubhouse
Mhm.
has trained,
Yes. Trained nurses and mental health workers,
okay,
social workers as well, that can help them with some of those other issues that they have.
Councillor O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Out of curiosity, and thank you for your presentation, and then further to what Councillor Hammond was saying, is there a number, like a threshold of births that need to happen in Grand Forks before that service goes back? Because I'm one of those parents that had to travel to Penticton
Right.
to.
Not that I'm aware of, if there's a number, it usually is population based.
Okay.
And again, thinking about Nelson, because I know it better than Trail, is, I mean, you're looking at 10,000, at least in that city, but the catchment area with all of those small towns is really almost 18,000.
Okay.
So we're looking at about 18,000 in Nelson and our 4 or 5, and, you know, our catchment area being out to the west.
Okay. Thank you.
Do I have any
Does that
other
answer your
questions?
Yeah, it
question?
absolutely does. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, may I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Ross, Councillor O'Shea, all in favor? So carried.
Great.
Thank you,
very-
Ms. Crane.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't stay up to get back to work, so.
Our next presentation is from the RDKB, Mr. John MacLean, to give us an overview and information on the services and programs.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. MacLean.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Excellent.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I could I just provide a little bit of an introduction? Council, we invited Mr. MacLean to ask, just give us a little bit of an overview of some of the services that the regional district provides, and then answer any questions that the community might have in relation to the services that we offer. So, Mr. MacLean offered to come here today and answer any questions for council.
So thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to take a few moments of your time to talk about the Regional District Kootenay boundary and the things that we do. The handouts I've given you are the finalized budget numbers for 2015 and the services that Grand Forks participates in through the services offered by the Regional District. So just to give some basic background on the Regional District, just like your council, your corporation here at the city, we're governed by two main pieces of legislation, which all derive from the Constitution of 1867, which says municipalities are a function of the province. So the two main pieces of legislation we deal with are the Community Charter and Local Government Act, whereas the City of Grand Forks will largely work within the jurisdiction provided by the Community Charter. The Regional District is still largely under the Local Government Act. So we're one of 28 other regional districts in the province. As regional districts go, we're actually relatively small, both in terms of size and the number of services that we provide. There's about 31,000 square kilometers in the Regional District Kootenay boundary, and we have about a population of about 32,000 all told, including the municipalities. So regional districts are primarily a service delivery vehicle. Our main focus in life is to provide services either through the regional district or in partnership with our members, either the electoral areas or the municipalities. We were all created in 1966, and we do have a lobby role. So on behalf of rural issues or on behalf of regional issues that everybody agrees to, the regional board does have a lobby role with the province. When we're looking at our services, we look at a few main things. We use a lot of citizen input. We cannot generally offer a lot of services without either a municipality or the voters saying that we can. We promote the service needs and the interest to the board, and we participate in decision-making processes throughout the process with the directors. So our board is 13 members. 8 are from the municipalities and are appointed from councils like your own. So that's Midway, Greenwood, Grand Forks, Rosslyn, Warfield Trail, Montrose, and Fruitvale. And then 5 electoral areas, West Boundary, rural Grand Forks, Christina Lake, Lower Columbia, Old Glory, and Area A. So again, we have about 31,000 residents within the regional district, 8,100 square kilometers, and we have about 18,500 homes all told throughout the regional district. That's according to the 2011 census. Earlier, I made a comment about the fact that we're service-oriented. All of our services must be operated and established by bylaw. Generally, we must have the approval of the residents that are going to be taxed before we're allowed to do anything. We have referendums, we have petitions, we have alternative approval, and in some cases, councils are allowed to consent to participate in services on behalf of their electorate. When we do a service establishment bylaw, which are the governing bylaws of our services, we have to determine what the purpose of the service is. It has to be defined. Who the participants are, the service boundaries. We have to draw a map. If you're not inside the service, you don't provide the service, you don't pay taxes for the service, and how we're going to share those costs, including a requisition limit. So when council does their budgeting, and I'm going to assume it's been a while since I worked in a municipality, but this is the way it worked back then, you focus on a tax rate, a mill rate, and what that's going to generate in terms of revenues for your services. We don't do that. We focus on a requisition limit. So what we do is we focus on how much we're asking the taxpayers to provide us. 100,000, 200,000, whatever that number is. We don't actually know what the tax rate is until the province sets it, and it's the province that sets the tax rate. So when we operate a service, the other thing that we must remember is it's operated like it's the only service that we have. There's a very good example right here in Grand Forks. The pool and the arena are across the parking lot from each other. They are two separate services. The pool could be having a wonderful year. Lots of people in there swimming. Nothing breaking down. Lots of money. That's rare, but it happens. The arena could be having an absolutely horrible year. There was my phone. Excuse me, I'll get rid of that. Sorry about that. So the arena could be having an absolute crappy year. Everything's breaking down, there's nobody in there, revenues are down. Even though the pool and the arena are the same taxpayers, they are separate services. Not one nickel can travel across that parking lot. It has to stay within the pool service. That is the nature of the services. Each service must be managed like it's the only one we have. We do not transfer funds between services. So when we talk about sharing the cost of the services, there's many different ways that we can do it. The default position is on the basis of assessment. So each participant has an assessment. We take that assessment and whatever the relative share is, that's how much of the cost they pay. We can do parcel taxes. We can do things on the basis of population, or we can do things on the basis of a fixed percentage. Again, the pool and arena are good examples. Can't exactly remember which one is which, but one of the two services has a fixed percentage. Grand Forks pays so much percentage, Area D pays the other. So we have all of these different opportunities for making decisions on how we share costs of our services. So within the regional district, we have services that are region-wide, solid waste, administration. Those are region-wide services. We have sub-regional services. Those are services that include one or more municipalities, one or more electoral areas. Building inspection, emergency planning, recreation, the library, the curling club. Those are all sub-regional services. We have electoral area services. Those are services that only the electoral areas participate in. Planning and development would be the prime example there. Local area services that are just within the local area. So here we have a regional rec service within electoral area D that only area D pays into. And lastly, we have specified areas. The best examples of specified areas are actually down in Christina Lake. We have parcel areas, the fire services area. The fire services for rural Grand Forks is a specified area. Not everybody participates, not everybody pays. So those are the basics of how our services are derived. That's how we provide those services. That's how we go about approving them. So when we look at our 2015 financial planning process, which we have just completed, we have a defined process that we go through every year. We generally start in the fall of the year. We look at service levels. We look at how much it's going to cost to maintain things the way they are. That is the default position. Whenever we look at a service, we start out with the premise that we're going to keep things the way they are before we decide to increase services or cut services, depending on where we want to go. We look at our revenue sources. We determine whether or not we need to borrow any funds. We have a discussion with the participants. So when we talk about the participants, we're talking about the elected official participants. So in this case, Director Krog, Councillor Krog, would play an active role in discussing all of the budgets that Grand Forks participates in every meeting, in every process. We determine our service levels. Again, there's good examples here. The pool is an expensive service. So one way to control costs within the service is to cut service levels. That's one of the easiest ways to manage things. That decision is made by the elected officials. We do public consultation within the rural areas. We go out, we do town hall meetings. We tell the folks what they're going to be looking at in terms of their services and how much we're going to be asking in terms of the budget. We make that same opportunity to councils, and I'm here today to discuss things. And then finally, we have to adopt our financial plan by March 31st of each year. That's mandated by law. The main reason for that is so that we can give you your requisition, so you know how much you're having to pay for our services that you participate in. So when we look at 2015, we're seeing a slight increase in the budget. It's about a $37.5, $38 million budget this year. We've generally been floating around above 30 million for several years now. Generally, for the rural residents, a majority of the tax base is still provincial, school tax, whatever the case may be. Within the municipalities, we don't have all the information, so it's hard to judge. So in this year, you'll see that on the documents I provided, the services that Grand Forks participates in, we're looking at just over, well, it's 0.17% increase in total requisition to the city of Grand Forks. These numbers are subject to a little bit of change because we get final assessment numbers at the end of March, and they're probably just being plugged in now. But we're probably very, very close. The large increases this year are in the aquatic center and in the arena. And then there's a small increase in the library service as well. So there's no real large increases, no large decreases. The large decrease in administration is due to debt being paid off, and the decision to maintain things the way they are. An interesting fact in the administration service, that's a general government service, general government administration services. That service is largely paid for by the 7 Mile Dam. 7 Mile Dam is a large dam located on the Pond Array, just outside of Fruitvale. And it's owned by BC Hydro. BC Hydro pays grant in lieu. The board made a decision many, many years ago to contribute the grant in lieu to administration services. That way everybody would get the benefit from it. So that service receives about $1.4 million a year from the 7 Mile Dam, which pays for large components, large parts of the administration service. I didn't want to take up too much of your time, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the regional district in general or about the information I provided. And again, I make the offer that if you ever need to have a conversation, you can flow your questions through your CAO or give us a call directly. I'd be happy to answer.
Do you have any questions? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. John, why is the increase in the aquatic center so substantial this year? 13,700.
The aquatic center is largely, the costs are largely around personnel. So there's the QB agreement increase in there, which was 2%.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some capital needs that we need to take care of.
Councillor Warshagin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation, first off. And sitting on the Rec Commission board for the past 6 years, in fact, this Thursday is my last meeting. My 6 years is up. Finally get out of there. We're given, when it comes to budget time, 3 different budgets. We're given the arena budget, we're given the aquatic center budget, and the third budget, the programming budget. That budget can flow between the two, can it not?
No.
That's only for the aquatic center?
They're actually no, it's actually, the recreation programming service is actually a separate service yet again.
Is it?
It just has components of both the arena and the pool included in it.
Interesting, okay. It was presented to us differently before, as a way to offset costs.
Well,
We should shift things from pool from the pool budget into the programming budget.
Shifting would be the term that I would have some challenges with.
Okay.
I think it'd be more accurately said that there are components of programming that take place both in the arena and the pool that are best paid through the programming budget rather than through the pool budget.
Okay, and where would that, is that a budget that the city also pays into, and which one would that fall under? So I see curling rink, I see aquatic center, arena, but no programming budget.
It's a rec commission.
Is it rec commission budget?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you. At the RDKB 101 that we attended at Trail, and you spoke about, I don't think, no, you didn't. We had a presentation on all the different services, and one of them was on fire service. And can you
Yes.
just speak about that again? You know, how we share those services between Grand Forks and the rural Grand Forks?
Sure. 2 years ago, the improvement district, the Grand Forks Rural Fire Improvement District, transferred their service to the regional district as a regional district service. Before that time, the improvement district and the city had a contract that established that the city would be responsible for the administration and general operation of the service, and the Grand Forks Rural Fire Department would contribute costs. Since that time, we've maintained that contract. It's still in existence. The CAO and I have had a conversation that it does require a little bit of renewal, and we're probably taking that on this year. There was a decision made at the time of the transfer that it would be best to take things slowly for the first little while, and everybody agreed to that. The Grand Forks Rural Fire Department, a regional district service, contributes a contracted amount to the city of Grand Forks for the administration and operation of the fire service. And then we also do contribute to capital programs within the city from within the service.
So there's they back each other up?
No, it's operated as one service.
Okay.
We do not have a separate administration. We do not have a rural chief.
Mhm.
Chief Kerri operates the whole service.
Councillor Hammond.
I've just noticed that there's a $7,000 increase in solid waste services this year. Is there anything, changes happening?
That is the increases this year. There's no real large increases in programming. What's happening within solid waste is the allocation of post-closure funds. So we are required to have post-closure funds. They have to be handled within a certain accounting standard. And we had to change the way we did things. So we were running a small liability over the next 5 years. The only large difference, and it actually has no impact on Grand Forks because we already have the program, is the expansion of the organics program throughout the service.
Councillor Rasheed.
I was just gonna say that we have to, and I think Councillor Crog explained that, we have to plan post-closure and prepare for post-closure, so we have to fund that. So that's part of our responsibility as a community and as a local government, and sharing that responsibility is to plan for 25, 50 years down the road, how we're gonna be handling the off-gassing, how we're gonna be handling all the other components of the landfill site, because there'll be required testing. They'll have to go out there with piezometers and test the water quality, and if there is any other remediation that'll have to happen, once the site is closed, there'll have to be funds in place. So what they do is they prepare and put these funds together for that. It is a common practice. Then once we reach that threshold, then we can look at how we can use the site from a community perspective or other land uses that would be permitted there. But that's way down the road for us.
Councillor Rasheed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to the question regarding the regional fire service, out of curiosity, what within the service, how does the breakdown work in regards to vehicle replacement within the fire department?
So the rural service will be responsible for replacing the capital requirements within the rural service still.
Okay.
We will contribute, it was part of the agreement that we contribute to the command vehicle for the deputy chief, and we did contribute capital funds towards the latter.
Okay.
But when it comes to buying a new pumper or a new tanker out in the rural area, it'll be the rural service that will be responsible for that.
Okay, that's perfect.
Mr. Mayor, I was wondering if we could get John to explain a little bit of or John, are you prepared to discuss some of the diversion things that are happening at the landfill to divert things away from going into some of the programs? You mentioned a little bit about the composting site and maybe some of the metal separations, and there's a lot of great things happening there that are great for our region.
So we've had a pretty active diversion program throughout the regional district for many years. One that's actually recognized and we've achieved a couple different awards for. Our diversion rates are rather high as it comes to regional districts and rural areas in particular. So we are, over on the east side, we are signatories with MMBC. So they took over our Blue Box program in Greater Trail in electoral areas A and B. Over here, we continue to have a contract until 2017 with a local contractor. So we took the subsidies over here. But the program's working very, very well. The Blue Bag program over here is widely accepted. We always have a conversation every time that we talk about tipping fees or something like that at the landfills. There's always an ongoing discussion regarding folks not liking paying tipping fees. Well, one of the reasons that we have the diversion rates that we do have is because we have tipping fees. If people could just throw away for free, they would choose to do that in many, many cases. There are folks out there who would still recycle and things like that, but the tipping fees do contribute. So we're going to expand our organics program. That's going to have large, far-reaching impacts on our services and the taxpayer in general as we expand those programs. Over here, we were talking about the waste stream being about 40% organics. If we can pull that out of the garbage that we have to bury within the landfill, that means that we can extend the life of our landfills a long time, which lowers the amount that we have to put away on an annual basis for post-closure, which does nothing but good things for all of us. It reduces the amount of gas that you're producing, so then maybe you don't have to talk about landfill gas management systems. It also reduces the amount of leachate that you produce when you don't have those organics rotting, and your chances of landfill fires does drop a little bit. So these programs are going to be meaningful in the long term. I can guarantee you that the one thing that none of us ever want to go through is siting another landfill. I've been through it in my career. It is the worst process in the world because you cannot make anybody happy. So anything that we can do that extends the life of our landfills through recycling or through diversions is very much money well spent.
Councillor Wershagen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to that, what is the lifespan? What's left on our landfill here, roughly?
75 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're not talking imminently
Okay.
here.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. John, what is the acceptance in the city of the composting is there an acceptance or are there?
Well, I believe so. We started as a pilot program, we started in Grand Forks within the city. It was based on the success of that pilot program that we expanded in. There's always going to be a few folks that question the need. But my understanding, and that's largely based on the fact that I'm not getting screamed at on the phone on a regular basis, which does happen, is that it's being widely accepted. These programs, they're not new, they're not even novel anymore. You look at any large community that has an aggressive program, and organic recovery, green bin recovery, whatever the case may be, is the standard now.
I personally, I love the system.
So we're pretty excited. We're rolling out in Christina Lake right now. Our partners are door knocking and delivering bins as we speak. We're going to have some public education coming up in the next couple months. Probably do some during the summer so we can try and capture some of the summer residents in Christina Lake. As quickly as we can expand this program out, we will be.
Councillor Allen.
I understand the need for the tipping fees at the dump, but it just amazes me. how people will drive past the dump with a pickup or a trailer and drive miles up into the bush to discard furniture and appliances. And it disgusts me. I take pictures wherever I see them, but they don't want to pay the fee to dump them. So at what expense and at whose expense is the reclamation of that land that they're destroying out in the bush?
We report all illegal dumps to the province, to the conservation officers. We have a program where if a community member, a neighbor, goes in and cleans up an illegal dump site, we'll waive tipping fees for the material coming in. So we do those kinds of things now. We try to work with the Crown as much as we can.
Are there stiff penalties if a person is caught? I mean, I know people are careful
Yes.
usually to take out any mail or anything that might have their contact information
Yes,
in it. But
there is. But it's provincial. It's not through us.
So enforcement is very tough.
Yes, it is very tough.
It's just disheartening.
Yes, it is. I agree.
Kilometers up into the bush, and it's beautiful wilderness, and you come across a whole dump site. Yeah.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, just in another regional district that I worked in, they had a bit of a program where all of the payers that were on the system, a small amount was contributed, and there was a point in time where they were able to go into areas and fly out old vehicles because they dumped them over the banks, and nobody could go in and get those, but the regional district had funding, and then the community, depending on the organizing committee, so if you had a pitch-in week or a cleanup week, that was facilitated, and the regional district actually was flying vehicles out of the watershed that were generally rallied over the bank, and it just became this situation where we had to fund it somewhere, but it became an extra cost for the garbage service because everybody had to pay for those things. So those are things that can be considered, but when people do those illegal dumps, there is a cost, and everybody else has to pay for it.
Do I have any other questions from the gallery? May I have a motion to receive the presentation of Mr. John MacLean, Councillor Ross, Councillor Crock? All in favor? So carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. MacLean. We'd now like to invite Mr. Jacob Noseworthy to give a presentation on behalf of the BC Youth Parliament. Good morning, Mr. Noseworthy.
Good morning, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of the British Columbia Youth Parliament. To start, I'd just like to give you a little bit of a history of the organization. It was begun in 1924. It was the brainchild of a young man by the name of Taylor Staton. He was part of the YMCA and was a recruit to the Boer War. He later went on to do a tour across Canada for the YMCA, and in Vancouver he brought up the idea of a youth parliament. It was created originally by the Protestant and Lutheran churches, and it held its first session in 1924. The first premier of, at the time known as the Older Boys Parliament, was Walter Stewart Owen. He later went on to become the 22nd Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia. Later on in 1974, after the Dave Barrett government was elected provincially, there was pressure on the organization to allow girls in, or they would lose access to the legislative chambers. So fortunately, upon that, it shifted into the British Columbia Youth Parliament and started allowing girls and people from all faiths to attend. There has been a lot of difficult times through the history of the Youth Parliament. Since it was founded in 1924, it was just getting started during the Great Depression and unfortunately shut down during World War II. So it has had some difficulties due to the times, but it has managed to persevere. In the 40s, they had quite a few financial difficulties and difficulties with the organization of the Parliament. But fortunately, through the involvement of churches and donations from other organizations, they were able to keep the Parliament going. Eventually, from 1939 to 1945, it was shut down due to the war. and it took some effort to get it started back up afterwards because of the delay, and there was a parliamentary convention held in the Lower Mainland. And since then, the British Columbia Youth Parliament has gone on uninterrupted. Another notable alumni is Linda Reid, who's currently the Speaker of the British Columbia Legislative Assembly and served as a cabinet minister during her time at BCYP. I also wanted to mention a few of the other components that the British Columbia Youth Parliament puts forth. We have regional youth parliaments which occur all across the province. We have 6 located in 6 different geographic areas. I am helping this year to organize the Southern Interior Youth Parliament in Kelowna, and I hope for that to be a success. There was also a camp that for underprivileged children that went on in the past in the early 2000s and late 1990s, but that was unfortunately shut down as we did not have enough funding. But we are attempting to continue on with it and formed a new project called Project Phoenix, as it was literally brought up from the ashes, much like a phoenix. And it was put into legislation last year, and we're hoping to have Project Phoenix events occurring in the interior this year, possibly even one in Grand Forks. We are also not a mock parliament, but a model parliament. All the legislation we pass is binding, and it controls our activities throughout the year. We have our own fundraising events. We also do service projects in the community in groups, and our motto is youth serving youth, so we do whatever we can to help out other young people in our communities. My experience with the British Columbia Youth Parliament has been life-changing. I've met absolutely amazing people there, and it's an organization that I support incredibly. It has really further instilled a passion in politics into me, and it is something I'd like to go into as a future career. We also have another motto of the British Columbia Youth Parliament that I'd like to share with you that I think is very important. It is say what you mean what you say, and do what you said you would do. I believe that's important because I said I'd do whatever I could to help further the youth parliament movement, and through my initiatives such as coming here, I've also been assisting with the management committee to plan youth parliaments. I am helping to plan the Project Phoenix events, as well as my chief returning officer duties at the Southern Interior Youth Parliament. I would like to further grow the youth parliament movement and make it into the great thing that it really was in the past, but unfortunately isn't at that same level today. But I believe that with some help, we can get there again. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Councillor Thompson.
That was an awesome presentation, Jacob. Thank you very much. You are trying to raise funds, as I understand it, for the so that the youth parliament can continue. Is that correct?
That is correct. As you served on the Phoenix Foundation board last year, I greatly appreciated the donation from the Phoenix Foundation that I received last year. That was to allow me to recoup some of the costs of attending and to be able to attend the Southern Interior Youth Parliament as well as go back this year. So because of that very kind donation, I have been able to become more involved in the organization. But now I would really like to help the organization out in any way possible and to see what funds I can raise, because I believe it's incredibly important in the development of youth in this province. A lot of alumni have went on to go into fields such as politics or law, and I believe that if it wasn't for the youth parliament, that we wouldn't have those people going on into those fields, because it really helps to develop the sense of not only community, but of importance of the political system in our province and our country.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for your leadership and example that you are to all of us here. Thank you. Just a couple of questions. I like that, you know, the older boys parliament, you know, heaven forbid that we, and sometimes I think we see it today in some levels of government, that we've moved away from that. I'm just, a couple of questions. You know, what influence do you think that there could possibly be if there was representation from youth parliament in the various standing committees, both in the provincial and the national level? Like, how do you see that something that could have an influence, or to keep it a little bit more well-behaved?
I truly believe that having representatives from youth parliaments would definitely help the standing committees. I know that from some of the youth wings of the political parties in British Columbia, they do send delegates to go to certain standing committees, but especially because the British Columbia Youth Parliament is nonpartisan, we have a unique outlook that other youth organizations don't have, and I believe that would be incredibly beneficial.
Is there any interest of becoming a parliamentary page, or does your involvement with youth parliament give you a bit of a leg up in order to have that experience of being a parliamentary page?
I'm unsure if that gives you a leg up, but personally that is something I'm very interested in looking into for the future. I'm hoping to go to school in Victoria at some point at the University of Victoria, so being a page in the legislature is something I'm very interested in, but I'm not sure if the youth parliament would give you a leg up. I know it would be something that they consider as perk when you're applying, but
right.
There's no direct correlation.
Okay, and just one more question if you don't mind. Charitable status. Do you have charitable status? So if there was, you know, folks from the community that are here today or watching on Grand Forks Television or know about, you know, your desire to support parliamentary youth, is there charitable status?
There is a charitable status. We are also a non-profit organization, and we issue tax receipts for anybody wishing to make a donation. So they can claim that on their income tax and get some of their money back that they donated.
Okay, do you have any personal needs in order for you to continue to pursue your goals and your involvement?
Right now, thanks to the generous donation of the Phoenix Foundation last year, I am able to continue going and keep myself financially stable with costs and food and travel, that type of stuff. But right now, my main goal is to promote the organization to as many people as possible and to get it any help in any way possible.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Jacob, the youth parliament and those involved in it, do they work within their own communities to promote young people, to engage young people to become involved in local politics by getting out and voting, or, you know, what kinds of things does the youth parliament do to promote that kind of service?
As of right now, there is no real promotion to be involved in politics or go out and vote. One of the requirements to return year after year is to have 20 hours of community service. I'm currently fulfilling that on the Columbia Basin Alliance for Literacy Board, and the other people throughout the province are fulfilling theirs in different ways. Some people help out at soup kitchens, but one, such as our motto of youth serving youth, we really aim to help out youth in any way possible, such as through the Project Phoenix that we created, which will be a day camp for youth to come and play games, crafts, that type of stuff. And that would be oriented towards youth who couldn't usually go to, say, a camp like Pines Bible Camp because of the cost. But as of right now, there isn't any political part in the community.
So you don't go out and speak to the high school students or to other youth to encourage them to become more engaged in any level of politics, be it local, provincial, or federal?
A lot of the members are active members in political parties and do speak to youth in that way, but as an organization, currently, we don't have that, but that is something I personally would be interested in seeing.
Do I have any other questions? Councillor Crock? Hello, Jacob. Just a comment. I know you're an avid viewer and you watched intently when we were discussing grant and aid or lack of grant and aid. And I've always been one who doesn't believe really in grant and aid. Like, I support what you are doing. And I'm not saying that the organization isn't worth funding. It's just that I didn't have the belief that I should be asking the taxpayers to fund it. I did say at that meeting that I would fund towards it, and I did write out a check, but as a true politician, it's sitting on the dining room table. So we will have to get together to get you that. The other thing too is if you do manage to pull together a Phoenix event in our area, then I would like you to call me because I can help with that. I know a caterer. So I would definitely be willing to donate. So I'm willing to donate on behalf of me for what you're doing. And it's pretty brave, I believe, to for a person to say that they're interested in politics or want to become involved in politics when the majority of the world thinks we're evil weasels. So maybe you can actually bring a good name to politicians when people say that. So yes, I do have that check, and I will get that to you, and you can use it for funding this coming event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crock.
Councillor Hammond?
Jacob, thank you for that amazing presentation, and I have to commend you for your spirit and your perseverance with this. Do you have a fund, a donation set up where people can contribute? Because Neil's correct in that the city itself doesn't have grant and aid, but I'm more than willing to contribute, and I'm sure a lot of the civic-minded people that are in the gallery and watching at home, Facebook, you've had the publicity, you're getting the publicity. I think you'll have an amazing donation fund. So is there someplace that?
We do have our bank account, which is the Youth Parliament of British Columbia Alumni Society, and usually for donations it just goes to the member who's collecting it, and then once a month I bundle all the checks and donations up and send them to our Minister of Finance.
Yep.
So it usually just goes through the member, and then it also, as a sort of an added perk, there's they find out who raised the most money, and then there's a small award at the end of the year, just a little plaque. So
Maybe, because you're active on Facebook, maybe you could get your contact information out there and set a target of what you're looking for and make it a challenge. I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of community support, publicity, and I think you're just an incredible young man to have that, and very encouraging for other young people. It's good to see.
thank
Put
you
the
very
name of
much.
the organization on that, because I'll never remember that by the time I get home.
Okay.
To make, who I make the check out to.
Yes.
Or stop by and see us during the break.
Okay.
Hang around during the break.
Councillor Ross?
I was gonna ask who people can make the check out to. So Youth Parliament of BC,
Alumni Society.
Alumni Society, okay.
Councillor Crog.
I made the check out to you,
Okay.
because I wasn't sure if and it's up to you to decide if you need it to cover expenses, and or if it's going straight to the organization. And that's okay, I can just leave it that way, or?
I have had some checks addressed directly to me, and what
Yeah.
I've done with them is I've just cashed them and then went and wrote a check out to the Youth Parliament of BC Alumni Society from there. So all the funds I am raising right now are going to the organization.
Okay, that's easier, sorry. Do you want, I can rewrite it, or I can leave it in your name? What's easier for you?
You can just leave it in my name and I'll
Okay.
be able to pass it on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Noseworthy. May I have a motion to receive the presentation? All in favor? So carried. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
May I have a motion to call a 10-minute recess? Councillor Ross, Councillor Hammond, all in favor? Recess for 10 minutes. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Now our presentations from staff. The Manager of Development and Engineering Services in regards to the City of Grand Forks gravel pit adjacent to the RDKB Landfill. Recommend that council request that staff proceed with compiling a detailed report regarding the City of Grand Forks gravel pit and bring back to council for decision to proceed with the remediation and to amend the city's 2015 financial plan. May I have a motion? Or, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we received a letter from the regional district regarding the condition of our city's gravel pit. And because there is an over-excavation there, it's created an unstable slope and it's impacted their property line as well as their electric fence and FortisBC's transmission infrastructure. So they've requested that the city undertake remedial action to correct this over-excavation. So just so council has an idea. Currently, here's where the fence is. This is where property line should be. This is the 5-meter offset of where the remediation needs to be, and that would be the toe of the slope. So looking at it from the other angle.
Those are the power lines that are in effect, Sasha?
Yes, ones that have the lock blocks right below them. So if you go back, yeah, those are the lock blocks right there, being inspected. So basically, what we're asking or letting council know is the next steps in the process. So we'd like to forward a letter to the regional district acknowledging receipt of their letter and that council's considering remediation. We want to complete the survey of the property so that we know exactly where property line is and how much material would be required to be put back in. If we can't find property pins, we'll need to retain a BCLS to locate the property pins so that we know exactly where they are. We also would like to bring a geotech in to have a look at the unstable slopes and provide some recommendations on how to properly remediate it. And then determine the cost of the remediation. At this point, we're not totally sure what the cost would be until we know how much material needs to be involved. And then contact FortisBC to let them know what's going on. So then once we have all this information together, we bring it back to council in the form of a report with the costs and the what would be required to amend the city's financial plan. Any questions?
Can I have a motion to receive first before we discuss? Councillor Verschagen.
Sorry.
Do I have a second? Councillor Hammond. Okay, discussion. Councillor Verschagen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Where would the funding come from for this? Out of what budget?
Mr. Mayor, we would have to look for we'd have to look within the city's funding resources to see where we could fund this. At this point right now, we would bring that back in the report to determine where that would come from.
Councillor Wishing.
And why is there a school bus in there?
It's a bus.
Fire department? Oh, okay.
Mr. Mayor, there's some other components to this project that are pretty significant when we look at this. When we look at the site here, one of the things that we're required to meet is when we consume land, we have to meet the Crown's expectation when we're consuming lands. We all know in local governments we control the use of the land, but the Crown controls the consumption of the land. The consumption of this land must meet the Mines Act requirements. Across the road, we have an active mine where the side pile is. On this side here, we would actually need a mines permit to be on this site, to be actively consuming the land. Even to be importing stuff into the site requires us to be acting under the mines, or conducting ourselves under the Mines Act. The Mines Act is very strict. It is one of the oldest pieces of legislation. So one of the things we're doing right now is investigating within our organization and on how this transpired. We can see the erosion is continuing on, but one of the things we know we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go back to the Ministry of Mines and let them know what's happened here. There may be some further implications to the city on this. The reality is if the Crown doesn't get paid, the Crown is generally not that happy. We know that, but the best thing that we can do here is work for the remediation and then work through this process to determine what's happened. We don't know where the excavation has happened. We don't necessarily know all the details yet. We know that we brought in some blacktop here. We see the bus in here. There's a couple of tanks up in the top or in the midsection of the photo on the right. There's a few things that we really have to address. We have to address the groundwater because it's created an ecosystem. It then creates an environmental assessment that's required. So all these different things are triggered. But what we're doing right now today is we're just identifying and letting council know that we've received this letter and we're moving forward. Staff is going to move forward with the next steps and then report back to council before anything else transpires. So there's a lot of whys right now, and we'll get back to council on those whys on there.
Any other questions or concerns? So, all in favor of the motion? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Wishing? So carried. Next item on the agenda is again from our engineering services, an application for a development variance permit to construct an accessory building on a property located at 7580 16th Street. Can you give us a big description before we make the motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We received a development variance permit application for sorry, I'll go to the slide. For interior lot line setback variance from 5 feet to 2 feet, and to vary the ratio of the principal building to the accessory building from 50% to 93%. This property is currently zoned R1. There already is an existing building right here that's 1,120 square feet. Under our zoning bylaw, the accessory building can only be 50% of the principal residence. So he would be, or the applicant would be permitted 1,160 square feet. Because our zoning bylaw doesn't have a definition for density, council has the ability to vary this. For example, if we would have had something in the bylaw that would have said you could have an accessory building that's 5,000 square feet per acre, then council can't vary that. They're not allowed. You're not allowed to vary land use or density. But in this case, because we don't have a definition for it, council can't vary that. That is the proposed building. That is the location, 7580 16th Street. It's the cross-hatched area there, lot number 4. That is the front of the home. And that would be where the building would go. So under the Local Government Act, we have to let the surrounding property owners know that this development permit application has come in, and we need to afford them the opportunity to come speak at the May 4th Committee of the Whole meeting, and then council can make a decision based on feedback that they get at the regular meeting of council that evening.
Okay, so may I have council that have a motion to receive the application contingent on public input and approval. Also, that staff will advise council on site, size and density of structures as per our bylaws. Councilor Wershagen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Pan is here. I have a question in regards to what is this building going to be used for?
RV and car storage.
Okay, it's not a shop that's gonna have
No.
any sort of, okay. Thank you.
Point of order. We have a motion being put forward. Can I have a motion?
Oh, yeah, okay. Great.
Councilor Wershagen, do I have a second? Councilor Ross. Discussion. Sorry.
I asked my question in order, but I got the answer I was looking for. So, good, thank you.
Do we have any other questions or concerns? Councilor Hammond.
On the drawings, the schematic of this, it says originally it was 20 feet by 40 foot 2 by 10 feet, and it's been crossed out to 50 feet in length and 13 feet high, is that correct?
That is correct. The reason being that
Excuse me, sir, could you identify yourself, please?
my name is Harold Copan, and the reason for that is for future, when I sell the place for an RV storage for a motorhome, it has to have over 12 feet so it can go into a building. And that was the reason for extending the height of it. But it'll still be under 60 feet high. The other thing is, this building isn't on a footing. It is just on the ground. It isn't,
It's not on concrete.
no, it's designed to just sit on the ground. So the question I really have is whether or not this could be considered a temporary building or not, because it has no footings.
Right.
Proceed, Mr. Allen. Does that fall in the parameters of a movable building when it comes to that size of a structure?
I think that we have to be defined, Mr. Mayor, in our zoning bylaw. I think it's one of those gray areas that, relates to shipping containers and these other things. And really the saving grace for council is the amount of density they allow on the property to coverage, right? Because we're talking about, that's what keeps the integrity of your neighborhoods, is if everybody has 100% coverage or 93% coverage of their properties, then you don't really have the feel in the neighborhood of green spaces and these types of things, or just that, overall density is very, it's part of the community feedback that we get.
Mm-hmm.
The key to this though right now is going back to the zoning bylaw to determine, what regulatory pieces that we have in play there, whether that's a temporary building or a permanent structure. But bringing it back down to lot coverage is going to be the most important thing for council to consider here and what the neighbors' feedback is.
Also, based on that, do we not have a bylaw in place where even C-cans have to have a proper foundation now?
Mr. Mayor, I believe that I'm not sure, I'd have to defer that one over to our building inspector if he's not here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Manager of building
Oh,
inspector.
there he is.
Still here.
He's had,
So what was the question?
The question is, do we have a bylaw in place where even C-cans have to have a proper foundation now?
No, not a bylaw as per se for CCAN foundation, but the CCAN size exceeds the 10 or 100 square foot limit on a building permit. So that through the building code, we want to have a foundation under, whether it be compacted gravel, concrete piers, or a pad to support the can.
So would this apply also to this structure?
With the engineered drawings, this structure, I believe, can be attached to the ground with anchors. I don't think it has to have a concrete footing, but I haven't gotten into the plan to really look at it yet.
also being susceptible to wind loads, obviously, it would
Exactly.
have to be,
Yeah.
because it's quite a big building.
Yeah.
Councillor Crocker.
Yeah, just a quick question through you. Like there's no, or it's stated that there's no foundations required, but I did look at a similar building and they didn't say foundations were required as per the standard, you know, long wall foundations, but they did have it sitting on sonotubes. Is this similar? Do you have to drive the sonic tubes in?
No, there's anchors that are screwed into the floor, into the ground, the same as what the cables on telephone poles that go into the ground.
Okay.
They're a similar type of screw that anchors the building to the ground.
Would you be planning to have a slab on the inside?
Eventually, probably.
Would that not deem it then becoming more permanent once you put
No.
a slab?
Well, I'm allowed to put as much concrete on my property as I want. There is no limit to the amount of concrete that you can have on your property.
That's fine, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Copan, on the picture, and perhaps Sasha, you could go back, of the backyard, there is an arbor, and then I think it's your existing shop that you have.
Yep, and the one at the house.
Yeah, and then there is what appears to be a garden shed.
You want me to go to the photograph?
To the photograph, yeah.
Yep,
Is that yours or is
Yeah.
that your neighbor's?
that's mine.
Okay, thank you.
On my property, I've already got 3 temporary tents that I want to get rid of, which are an eyesore. And that's the reason I want to go to one building rather than having these plastic tents all over my property.
Oh, so that would be.
That was one of them right there,
Okay, thank you.
right beside the shop.
I have one quick question on the plan. It doesn't show the distance between the existing shop and the new building. What is the distance between?
About 6 feet.
6 feet to our CAO or to our building inspector. Is that within the realms of our bylaw? Is it not 9 feet normally between a building and a residence?
5 feet.
5 feet is acceptable. Thank you. Councillor Hammett?
On the aerial photo, I'm not seeing a lane access. Do you have back lane access?
Yes,
Through
there
there?
is, right
Right
in
here.
that corner of my property.
Oh, from the corner, okay, and so you don't have a house directly behind you then? Like the back of your property, you don't have a neighbor's property right back?
No, I
And there's a
back
lane
onto a
separate.
neighbor's property right behind me.
But their house is on
Out
the
at
other
the
end.
front, right there in that corner is an old chicken barn down lower. Sorry,
What's the length of your actual property then?
330 feet.
Oh, so it was pretty deep.
It's a half-acre lot.
Mr. Allen?
Mr. Mayor, so for the process for everybody today will be the, if council elects to direct staff to proceed with the notices to the neighbors, then that would precipitate more discussion, because the neighbors came back and council did a little bit more research on some information that we have. That would allow council the ability to make a better decision. I think one of the things that the most important part of this is the community consultation with the neighbors directly adjacent in the proximal area, and those that have a general concern regarding lot coverage in our community. So I think for today's purpose, if we could, if council sees fit to pass the motion, then what will happen is it'll take the next steps, and then it'll come back to council for further information.
Yeah, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We do have a motion on the table contingent. So any other questions or concerns? So all in favor of the motion? So carried. Thank you. Our next item is the Manager of Emergency Services. We'll be speaking on the Firehall rear parking lot entrance. Morning.
Morning, Mr. Mayor, Council. As you all know, we've ordered a new fire truck, which should be here sometime in May. And the new piece of equipment is a little bit bigger than our old fire trucks and our old ladder truck. Currently, when we go on our calls and we come back with our engines, we back them in off of 2nd Street into the front bays. Our engines are all sitting in the front bays. With the new ladder truck, and it's probably about 15 feet longer than any of our existing trucks. We can back it in off the street. It'll be fairly tight, especially in the summer when it's really busy. But what we're proposing is to bring it in through the rear parking lot. And we do have drive-through bays in our at our fire hall. So, and that was one of the intents when they first built the hall in 1986, was for that purpose, in case they wanted to drive apparatus through for parking. Much easier for the guys, much safer for the guys or for the crew. Having said that, by doing that, we would have to remove that existing island that's sitting there, because right now there's 2 small entries into the rear bays, and those yellow parking blocks there would have to go. And we would make one main lane right down through the middle where that herringbone of parking is, right there on the lines that you can see in the picture. So that's the way the engine would come in, which works out good, except for by doing that we're eliminating parking for our volunteers in the event that we get a call out. So the other part of the proposal would be the removal and or the relocation of the recycling bins, which are right beside. That would suffice the parking that we need for our volunteers. Okay. Any of the funds and with discussions from the former manager of operations and the new manager of operations, the funding for the work would be done out of the operations budget, the City Works operations budget. Not a lot of cost involved with the whole thing. As far as the fence, I'm not sure whose fence that is. It would have to be removed quite likely, but I'm not sure whose that is. I spoke with Rob McGregor from the Regional District last week, and he wasn't sure whose fence it was. He thinks it's theirs, but he's not sure. Anyways, so that would be our proposal moving forward. And like I say, that's with the arrival of the new ladder truck in May.
So may I have a motion that recommend to approve the proposed parking lot entrance change and removal and relocation of the recycling bins to provide adequate volunteer firefighting parking at the April 20th, 2015 regular meeting of council? Councillor Rashagan, Councillor Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just get started. One of the things that we're going to have to be cognizant of is the fact that the commercial diversion of waste for the businesses downtown, they look at the recycle bins as part of the process. Keeping in mind that we have recycling facilities within 1 kilometer at the landfill, the same services are offered there. The amount of maintenance that will reduce in the downtown core for the regional district and the cost of the city for the provision of that service will be reduced. The most important thing, though, that the fire chief was talking about was the parking for the volunteers. So we have such a great volunteer fire department in our community. We're very, very fortunate. The one thing we want to be considerate of is providing them safe, easy egress to the buildings in the event that there is a response. The last thing we want to see is the firemen parking further and further away from the building and trying to get to the fire hall. Then we know that the golden hour is the most important thing when they're on a rescue event or a fire event. The golden hour is one that people always refer to, but it is it's the most important thing that we can look at here. And with this new fire truck, we're investing over $1 million in a fire truck, and I believe that to consider how we look after that device is very important. So we don't want it to be subject to, the guys aren't driving it all the time, so we want to make it as easy as possible to move it in and out of the facility. So it's something for council to consider in this discussion.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just wondering, right across the street and beside Whispers of Hope, there's a city-owned parking lot. Is that would that not suffice for volunteer parking?
It would, although it's over 200 feet away.
Oh,
And
okay.
when you're a volunteer and minutes count,
Sure,
right?
I didn't realize it was that far.
Yeah.
Councillor Crog?
I like the idea of the easier access, and especially from the back. So it wasn't mentioned, but if you are backing in fire trucks, then you're probably blocking the main road while you're doing it. So it makes a lot of sense. The only concern I have is one that's been going on for years and years and years and years, and that's the relocation of the recycling services that are there. It's been debated on, I don't know, 3 or 4 different councils that I've sat on, and it's ended up staying there for a specific reason. Yes, there's more facilities within a kilometer, or I think it's a little over a kilometer, but it doesn't have that same usability by the commercial core, where every day you see employees walking stuff over to that, not driving it up to a landfill. And again, as if the business closes at 5:30, the landfill is already closed. People have argued that the site is messy. Recycling sites do not mess themselves. People, inconsiderate people do, right? So I don't have an issue with that. It's just, it says relocate or remove. There's no plan B, there's no we're gonna site it here type thing. So I can definitely support that. Obviously, it's gonna be referred to another meeting and we'll vote, and I can support the parking lot adjustments. Not 100% sure if I can support the removal. And I guess I look at it like, okay, this is where the truck is gonna come back after the fire. So the truck is not gonna be in the parking lot when the volunteers arrive. It's after it's done, after the emergency's over, that the truck would be headed back for its bay. I believe I'm correct in that.
You are, although I think it would be fairly inconvenient to have all those volunteers move their vehicles so we can get that truck in there.
It would be fun.
It would, yeah.
Like,
I guess that would be fun. Yeah, it would be fun.
Yeah, it would be fun, yeah, so.
It'd be like a rodeo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just a heads up that unless there's a place to relocate those bins, I'm just not too sure about it.
Gentleman in the back.
Les Johnson. I was just, when I was doing my little video on where to put the bins, I was looking at the parking lot across the street. That's the Fireman's Park parking lot you were?
Yeah.
Okay, so at first I was going, well, it's only 200 feet, but then I realized, well, 2 things about that. One, they'd be crossing an actual road in a hurry, and that could be potentially hazardous. And the other is, if we ever really got busy downtown, that's a public parking space, right?
Yeah.
So they
That's
could
right.
come to work and have to park down the street and look at
Somewhere.
parking.
That's right.
While the people are waiting to get out to the fire,
Yep.
right? Okay, that, I'm just curious about that, so. Go
I
ahead.
have a question to our CEO, Mr. Allen. Based on Councillor Crog's statement of the public, not the public works, the landfill, is there a possibility that the hours could be adjusted?
That would, Mr. Mayor, that would come at an additional cost that would have to be borne. Now, we talked about potentially relocating. If that was needed, we could explore that with the regional district on some options for the relocation of bins. We could look at if council really wanted to keep that as an additional service on top of curbside collection and the provision of the landfill hours along with this. We can still provide it. It'd just be a matter of determining where it can go, the best locations for it. I believe that this is one of the, probably been one of the most sensitive topics that Councillor Crog has talked about. It's been a staple in the community that people have been not wanting to let go of. But I think as we move through this process now with the fire department, if we're going to relocate them, maybe we find a more suitable location if that's the will of council.
The gentleman in the back.
Thank you, Mayor. Kerri Jarvis, I would just like to confirm with what Councillor Crog has said, that having used the recycling as recently as yesterday, there was people literally lined up to use the 4 bins that were there, and they were all full. I think if we try to go out to the landfill, unless the hours are changed dramatically, we're just asking to have a bunch of this stuff laying all over town, because people are not going to go to the landfill when it's not open, obviously. We're going to have a real chance that we don't allow the people to, myself included, to have these bins somewhere else that's reasonably convenient on a 24-hour basis. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a queue here. Councillor Hammett.
Just 2 things. A few years ago, I remember we used to have, and I know these are owned by RDKB, am I correct?
Yes.
So, the decision to move them and where to move them would ultimately be, I'm sure, RDKB's.
No, and Mr. Mayor, it's a service that we ask the RDKB to provide us, so we pay for that service. It would be contingent on their trucks being able to back in and unload them safely and load them safely. There would be their requirements that go with that.
So, a few years ago, I remember that they had bins up on Donaldson Drive, and they're no longer there. So, I'm wondering what transpired that they were removed. Bottle Depot is up there. They have the electronic recycling up there. It made sense to keep it all together up on Donaldson Drive.
Where the bins out on Donaldson Drive in front of the Alpine operation? Where the
Oh,
Alpine's been?
perhaps that was when Alpine had the contract, yes. Okay, correct. The second thing I wanted to mention was, you're taking away that curbing and the vegetation to allow for the truck to swing in. Is there, and so that curb, as we see it right now, is the edge of the road. Is there going to be a barrier with an actual drive, like a visible driveway, or is it going to be exposed? Because I'd like to see some vegetation and some more curbing, like, so that it's got some appeal.
Yeah, and I think that the proposal eventually would be to, and on either side, if you are familiar with the parking lot at the rear, on either side there is some landscaping vegetation on either side, and then you have the 2 narrow driveways, and then the middle island. So that island would go out, and my proposal would be, and not this year, hopefully next year in the budget, would be to extend that vegetation farther, so we've got one dedicated center lane through.
Right.
Right, and then, obviously there'd be some landscaping vegetation that would be put in. Yep.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, just one more question. I noticed that there's always been a sign there saying there's a camera watching the site. I'm just curious whether anybody actually collects stats on when it's used and how much it's used. Like the gentleman was saying, it was quite busy this weekend, and on long weekends and opening weekends, it's a horror story at times. I'm just curious.
Yeah, and we have nothing to do with that camera. That camera is a regional district camera.
Okay.
And I believe it feeds back up to the landfill. And I'm not sure if they monitor it or what they do.
Councillor Rasheed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would there be any possibility if these bins were relocated to the landfill that there could be discussions in regards to adjusting their fence line to allow these bins to be placed outside of their fenced-in property to allow access 24 hours a day, no different than it is now?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, we own property across the street from the landfill. The city owns land there. To set up a transfer station there, I mean, I think once we'd have to consider the regional district on the ability to continue to work under the contract, because they clean up the site, they look after it. So if we're going to invest into that, yeah, it would be definitely something. As alternative locations would come up, I would recommend that council or committee of the whole consider this today, refer it back to staff for basically basically notice to the neighbors in the adjacent area, and then we'll bring it back to council for any sort of feedback or letters. And then what we'll do is we'll move forward with the options for relocation. But the reality, I think the fire chief has indicated that the fire truck and the volunteers require that area. I think that's kind of, we've elected to provide that service first as foremost from a life-saving perspective. I think as we move to the alternatives, I think that's what we need to get the feedback in from the public, and I would encourage council to approve the motion, refer the motion back to staff and ask us to get some more feedback and then bring it back to a regular council meeting.
Councillor Krog.
Yeah, just couple of things. Already been discussed why they're not up in front of Alpine anymore. There are recycling facilities already at the landfill. And it's, if you do have a vehicle and you are going recycling, I tend to go up to the landfill. I like the different bin selections. They have wider slots, and it's easier to do some recycling there. But this was a huge part of trying to keep it where it was the commercial sector, which doesn't really have that service. So the commercial sector, but it's used by the population. Yes, we offer curbside recycling every second week, but for avid recyclers, they're the ones that are using that. So just wanted to say that when we refer it back to staff, just because that sounds like where it's going, has the parking lot been looked at for realignment, or are we just figuring that this is the straightest route for the truck? But if we change the layout and the marking of the parking lot, can we somewhat achieve closer to what we have? And the kicker is, in the back of my memory, which is a very dark place, there is a thought that actually the RD owns the land. So we need to make sure, because I know that the fence was there, and I remember when it was in, and I thought it was either a lease or they actually physically owned the land. So we need to double check that.
Okay, as far as I understand on the land, the city owns land.
Just make sure, because it would
Yeah,
look bad.
I will for sure, but I've been doing a little bit of digging into that.
Okay.
Everybody I talked to, including Mr. McGregor from the RDKB, had all indicated that the city owns the land.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just to add to that, if that was RDKB land, that would have had to be, the road would have had to be closed. There would have been a road closure bylaw. The title would have had to been, the property would have had to been surveyed off, title raised at land titles, and the disposition of the land. There would be a long track of it in our records. So it would, what Councillor Krog is talking about, there would probably, there has to be some sort of responsibility falling on the regional district. So it may be a lease, like he's saying, or something along those lines. We've asked for the service, and we said, here, you can have this little.
But we're going to be referring back to staff in any event,
So just double check.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. For me, the biggest issue is the safety of our community with fire services, and the ability to get the fire equipment safely into the fire hall at the conclusion of a fire, and further the ability for our volunteer firefighters to access the hall in a timely fashion in order that there's no unnecessary delays. Yeah, I agree that the recycling is an important issue for some, and I would certainly support having our staff do some research and consulting with the regional district with respect to relocation, or the need to relocate those bins. And so I'm going to support the recommendation that's on the table.
Lady in the back, please.
Yes, Gloria Cook. I'm wondering if you couldn't just reduce the number of bins there so that you do leave some access to bins there, one or two, whatever, and then relocate the rest elsewhere, because it is a very handy spot for that end of town.
That's a good suggestion, and we'll refer it back to staff. Thank you. Any other further questions? Mr. Johnson.
In doing a little promo for this very item here, I ran around a few places just to throw things out there for people to think about. And I have some questions about at least one of the places. Behind the CIBC, where there used to be a hotel here in town, that burned down a long time ago. Is that owned by the city, or is that somebody else? So I'm not sure if that's enough space or not, but that's right downtown, it's a block away. There's a green space behind the Christian Center. I don't know whether they own that or the city owns that. It's not paved. part of the extension of the parking lot. It's downtown as well. It's two locations.
Thank you. Addressing to staff, Mr. Allen, would staff also be able to do a research to see how many municipalities actually have recycling bins in their center core?
Yep, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. We could bring back a report that would identify options for properties in the downtown core. We would bring back some options that would show some other properties in the surrounding area. I know that transfer stations are a way of the past. They're not very typical anymore. Transfer stations are generally, the landfill is considered to be a transfer station because it's a waste diversion site. We bury some waste there, but generally small transfer stations are non-existent because everybody's moved to the curbside. But the challenge is for the commercial people. The commercial folks don't have that diversion stream because they'd have to get large trucks or the bins in their alleyways to put the recycling in, and that poses a big challenge for them. So we will bring back a report that if council wishes, that will identify some options in the downtown core that would let you know of any other or communities that have transfer stations and what they look like, and if they're in the downtown core or not. And then we communicate out to the residents and the businesses in the area that this is what we're looking at, and seek some feedback for council.
Possibly an industrial park could be another solution.
Absolutely.
So that we keep the beautification of the city and we're not having containers in the downtown core. Councillor Crog.
Beautification of the downtown core shows an active recycling community. That's what we need. Now, if it's anywhere downtown, that would make sense to me because of that. If we are going to ask how many people have transfer stations located downtown, the second question has to be, do they provide or is there access for commercial recycling? So, and then when they do their recycling, is it every week? So it's like if you're going to compare apples to apples, just make sure that if they don't have one downtown, do they do their curbside once a week? And is their commercial sector looked after? Because it's half commercial and half just people or residential and stuff like that. If we are looking at another site such as the old Province Hotel, then that may be a better option. It may be a win-win because that piece of property is currently kind of used as a four-wheel drive parking lot, I guess, for want of a better word. So yeah, if we're going to get that information, just make sure that we have apples to apples. Like I say, I'm not married to it being there. I just don't want it to leave the downtown.
Councillor Rashagan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've discussed this at length here, and I think this discussion will continue once the report comes back. And with that being said, I'd like to call the question.
So do we want to make an amendment to the motion to refer it back to staff?
Yes.
May I have a motion?
To refer, because
To
the
refer
original motion
was to approve it.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to approve at this level.
No, but to send it forward for approval at the April, whatever. So if we send it back to staff.
So do I have a second on that? So all in favor of the motion to refer? So carried. And still have the original motion. All in favor of the original motion?
If you're referring it, it'll be-
Refer, we don't have to carry the second one, then we'll leave that and drop on.
Second one, we'll make it work.
I'll make it work. All right, we now have highlight reports, monthly highlight reports from the department managers. The item is staff request for council to receive the monthly activity reports from the department managers, starting with building and bylaw services.
Mr. Mayor, I can go through the reports, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Mayor, the building inspection and bylaw services is working on the process for the enforcement of the deer feeding bylaw, following up on complaints. dealing with camping along the riverbanks, following up on the, there was a camp that was set up in behind the cemetery, so we've had an issue in there. The building inspection component, following up on building permits, flood damage and fire damage property repairs, building inspection permits. You can see there's been several that have been taken out, but this year the value of permits is just over $731,000, which is a good sign. Mr. Mayor, moving on to the Chief Financial Officer's report. The Chief Financial Officer has been very busy working on the auditing process. So we've talked about this with council, but our independent auditor has been in, which is regulated under the community charter. The auditor comes in and takes a look at the municipal statements and finances, and then reports back to council in an independent body to let them know how things are going. The introduction of the financial plan has been undertaken. We're preparing the tax rate options for council to consider today. That discussion will happen shortly. The audit training, and we talked about some personnel issues in the report, Mr. Mayor, just ongoing internal issues. The corporate services, corporate and community services, obviously preparing agendas, human resource functions, ongoing records retentions after the City Hall fire. That's a big process. You'll probably hear about that from staff for the next 12 to 16 months. Participation in the outdoor recreation show, which went very well. The city staff went down and had a booth there in partnership with the chamber. I think they handed out over 500 pamphlets in respect to the city of Grand Forks, and there was videos and many things being shown there. The participation in the land development workshop on March 19th. So the provincial government was here talking about their exercise in raising capital with lands that are owned by the city and options for the city to consider. This is a process that the provincial government adopted that we undertook here in the city of Grand Forks, and they're utilizing for a provincial mechanism that all 13 of their economic development officers are using now. The manager of development and engineering has will participate in that workshop. Strategic engagement process at City Hall, which was very well received. There will be a report coming out shortly on that. The development inquiries, we're starting to receive a lot of development inquiries at this point. We've looked at a couple of rezoning applications, the development variance permits, working on the asset management component of our organization. That's been an in-depth process for us, and we'll have that open house tomorrow night for council and the community to come hear about how we're doing with asset management, and the community at Golden will be speaking, their previous mayor will be speaking on behalf of that. We've continued on with the climate action revenue and investment survey. The fire chief has been busy with a total of 51 calls. You can see the details of those calls. Volunteers, continuing education of the volunteers. Public education, fire extinguisher training at the RDKB staff. It was a request for staff at the aquatic center. Working on the budgeting, and you can see that the snowpack readings that the fire chief will monitor for flooding is 75% of normal this year. Where I think there's a little bit of a situation that we see happening in California with the drought conditions. We don't know how that's affecting us, but we know that there is the snowpacks are a little bit lower than normal. The manager of operations, the street sweeping program has been completed. The city park washrooms, we've been working on that. We've also completed the RFP process for the campground services. We're just determining how we're going to go about that. The city's been looking at contracting that service to a service provider that would look after that. One of the things that we're considering is how that service can better integrate community. Sign maintenance, patching, safety training. You can see for flagging, backflow prevention, fire safety training or fire safety checks in all of our buildings. Water and sewer comprehensive sanitary sewer flushing program. So doing our maintenance to make sure that we don't have any backups. Fire hydrant inspection programs, which are required annually by our insurance company. Water main flushing, that's to remove any potential solids that may exist in the water mains. Working on the data entry for the asset management program, so taking all of our asset inventory and implementing it into our software. Quarterly wastewater treatment plant maintenance, the cleaning of the contact chamber, so that's where some treatment happens. Departmental safety certification training. We had one of our operators just achieve a level 2, which we're required to have a level 3 operator, which we have one. One of our operators has just achieved a level 2, which is a great step for him personally and for our organization. We had a water main break at the airport, which is consistent with our asset management information that we're going to hear tomorrow night about how our infrastructure is actually performing in our community. The electrical, our annual pole replacement program is underway along with the assessment. Continuing voltage conversion program, so we're trying to maintain stability in our electrical utility, but also without limiting the amount of areas that are required to be shut down when we have to do routine maintenance. Identifying and consolidating our assets. So what we're doing is trying to reduce the number of assets that we have. So as we look at our asset management plan, we're not adding more to our asset inventory and creating more costs for us. We're actually trying to do cost containment and control. Continuing the door-to-door patrol to identify meter issues. So what we're doing is we've ongoing process of looking for potential electricity theft and just making sure there's been no tampering with electrical meters. From time to time, people will divert power around electrical meters, and we've seen that happen on several occasions. Mr. Mayor, those are the staff reports at this point. Just to follow up a little bit more on corporate services, I have been promoting, and I called it a little bit of, I don't know what the terminology be, but I've been trying to work hard for the city on achieving some gas tax grants, and our gas tax applications are in now. I've been speaking on behalf of our community on some of the things that we've been doing for asset management. I was in Cranbrook and in Kelowna promoting our asset management program on behalf of the province and doing a little bit of political brown nosing for us to get some money in this upcoming grant funding announcement. So we've been doing our piece and doing our regional contributions. So people are looking at us as leaders in asset management, and we are looking at hopefully receiving a few $1 million this year in grants. So we've got our fingers crossed. We have high expectations this year.
May I have a motion to receive the monthly activity reports? Councillor Washagan, Councillor Hammett, any discussion?
With regard to meter changes on the electrical meters, has it been the practice of the city to notify homeowners, property owners, when there's going to be a meter change or somebody's going to be looking at it physically? There have been some concerns expressed that I've heard about.
Mr. Mayor, the process generally from the Public Works Department is to put out notification to we can't necessarily go to each customer. We try to do it as a general canvas to the community that the electrical utility will be out doing inspections on electrical meters. Our process should be they should be knocking on the door, being identified as working for the electrical utility, so there's not strangers walking onto people's properties. The expectation is that our employees are identified with their orange coveralls and their business card with a lanyard, or with the lanyard with a business card from the city around their neck, being identified as municipal employees. If there is any concerns that that is not happening, could they please forward them to us so we can definitely make that corrective step. But that is our expectation, that they should know that there is somebody on the property.
Yes, I will be giving you a report on that too, Mr. Allen, because I had a citizen come forward and they said they were away and somebody had been on their property and they were doing something with the meter in and overall and the whole bit. The neighbor had seen it.
Okay.
So I will be talking about that later.
Thank you.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I was just wondering what the Climate Action Revenue Survey is. I've never heard of it before, and I'd just like to get a little bit more information about what that involves.
Sasha's still here?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. That's your department?
I'll have to bring back I'll bring back a report to council.
On what that is?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Any more other discussion or questions? So all in favor of the motion to receive it? Councillor Thompson, no. Carried, so carried. Move on to our bylaw section. Our Chief Financial Officer will be discussing the sewer rates for 2015 wastewater rates amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Briefly, for the sewer rates amendment, Council will be giving the final reading to the financial plan this evening, which included an increase of 5.48% for 2015 to begin in July 1st, 2015 for the sewer, for the wastewater rates. That would be effective for all the different customers equally. It will help us cover the debt payments for the city park lift station that began in 2014, and as well allow the city to put $10,000 into the capital reserve for infrastructure replacement. So that works out for a residential customer to about $3.84 per billing, or $23 per year.
Mr. Allen.
Could I ask our Chief Financial Officer just to explain a little bit about that, the borrowing process that happened for the lift station, and now that we've identified that, how it happens? Because we identified some short-term borrowing or long-term borrowing, and now we're just bringing that into play. Is that?
Yes. We actually do temporary borrowing when we're borrowing for a project until we determine exactly what the exact amount is going to be. So we get a little bit of temporary borrowing throughout the project, and then when we get to the end of the project and all the expenses are in, then we convert it to long-term borrowing. So we just pay a little bits of interest as we're in temporary borrowing, and then we convert it to long-term debt, and it's set for 5 years. The rate's set for 5 years on the borrowing, and every 5 years thereafter through MFA.
So that project was completed in about 2011?
The end of 2012.
End of 2012. So that's, you can see the timeline that it takes to process that stuff for amortizing and putting into the capital, and then getting the long-term borrowing in place. So sometimes there's some questions about why doesn't that happen quicker, but we have to close all the statements, make sure the auditors have reviewed everything, make sure that everything's in order, and then within that time frame, where it's about a 2-year process for it to actually become a long-term borrowing debt. So then it's following into this budget year.
Could I ask staff to give a clarification of the recommendation? Are we referring this to the April 20th? Because the way it reads, it asks to give the first 3 readings at the April 20th.
Yes, Your Worship, that would be correct. That would be because we'd like to give it more than 24 hours rest after the committee that will meet. So we'd send it to the next meeting.
Okay, so can I have council give me a motion to refer for the first 3 readings of Bylaw 2013 Sewer Regulation Amendment to the April 20th regular meeting of council? Councillor Vershegen, Councillor Thompson. Any further discussion or debate? Have the gentleman in the back.
Yes, your Mayor. Wastewater, sewer, can I presume that residents of Johnson Flats who are not on the wastewater package would be exempt from these extra charges?
So if you don't have sewer available to your property, if the sewer line doesn't run by your property and you aren't able to hook up, then you won't be charged these
That's what I wanted to hear. Yes, there's 7 or 80 of us down there that are not on city sewer, so.
No, the way we have it, through Your Worship, the way we have it right now, if you are able to connect to our sewer system, if the line runs by, then you are charged the basic and fixed.
It's up on top of the hill, it doesn't run down the hill. So.
Then you won't be charged any of
Okay,
the
so we won't be exempt from those charges, is that correct?
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, just one thing though, we do have community sewer services that we provide, and just to be clear that you're not totally exempt, because public washrooms are part of the sewer system, so there is an element of sanitary sewer that all residents pay for in the community. So that's an important distinction, that if you don't get the sewer service, you're not paying for the sewer service, but you may pay for a service of sewer within the community, or a service of wastewater in the community, an element of it that we all share.
I'm not sure I share that, but.
I think it's a community service, yeah, but indirectly, it's a service that is just like a park, just like a fire service.
Is that a form of a levy?
More or less, yes.
Okay, but basically, the residents in Johnson Flats who do not have access to city sewer will be exempt from these charges? Is that a fair statement? Okay, thank you.
Lady in the back, please.
Gloria Cook again. What amount of the sewer charges are we charged then for use of the washrooms?
Mr. Mayor, that would be broken down out of a formula, so I'd have to. that'll be broken down in the budget, so I guess that could be answered, but I couldn't answer it today. I'd have to get that answer. If that question was there, I could ask the person to provide it in writing, and then we could get the response back at a later time.
Is that satisfactory?
Be interesting for you to report ASAP on that.
Mr. Mayor, one of the first priorities for us is the asset management and the operations of the city. These inquiries, we will definitely get to them, but we can break that piece out. But it will take some considerable amount of staff time to undertake those calculations.
Thank you. Any other questions or concerns? Councillor Thompson.
Just a comment on this last issue by Ms. Cook. Those costs would be borne within the parks budget, not specifically for in the sewer service, sanitary sewer service. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Okay, so the motion on the table, all in favor? So carried. Again, to our Chief Financial Officer, the 2015 Water Rates Amendment.
Thank you, Your Worship. Attached is Bylaw 2008, which is the 2015 Water Rates Amendment to take effect, like the wastewater rates, effective July 1st, 2015. It includes a 2.4% increase in water rates. For the year, for residential customers, this would equate to $1.65 per billing, or $9.90 per year. This increase will allow $10,000 to go into capital reserve for infrastructure replacement in 2015.
So may I have a motion for council to give the first three readings to be referred to Bylaw 2014 Water Regulation Amendment at the April 20th regular meeting of council? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Wershagen. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Wershagen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before it comes back to us on the April 20th meeting, could we get the word wastewater removed from the background information?
Yes.
It says effective July.
Water regulation.
Yeah, it says wastewater rates will increase 2.4%. Four lines down.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Good catch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good catch. Any other questions or concerns? Gentleman in the back.
Gordy Shaw. When can we expect the water meters to be in effect?
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, the process right now is the inputting of the data into our software system. The finance department is inputting the data into capture that and then start to disseminate it. What we'll be able to do then is we'll be bringing forward a report to council in the next little while. Council's asked for a report on further options when it comes to the metering program. So we'll be reporting back to council probably in May. I'll have that report prepared. Once we have that, council will consider the last components of the water metering program. I would suspect that they'll refer some stuff back to the Water Rates Committee for further consultation. And it would be recommended that council move into or the Rates Committee would recommend council to move into a mock billing period. So it would be a pretend billing. We'd stay on these flat rates for a little while, and then we'd move into a mock billing period of 2 years so we could really analyze how our water is going, how our consumption rates look. And then from there, it would allow the residents to understand better how their water is being used on their properties, so they have the time to adjust and look at, if they need to put some, for instance, a low flow on your garden hose, or if your kids were doing certain things, teaching going through the education process of getting into the schools and, talking about it holistically throughout the community a lot further. That would be the recommendation for council, but it'll be at the will of council to determine when the rates structure is put in place. But we can see right now with the education material that they're dealing with in California, how important it is with the with shutting off the, I watched a thing on CNN the other day that was, over the year, it was 3,000 gallons of water was used just by leaving the tap on when you were brushing your teeth. It was an amazing amount of water that we would never consider, and they actually were rationed down to 68 gallons a person per day, and the average person, this fellow was using 200 gallons per day just to do the basics. So it's an important component of education that we get, and as part of that education is setting the rate structure. So it'll always be the will of council. The short answer is at the will of council, but I think it'll be over some more community consultation and education over the next little while. So
I understand correctly, so the first item that council will be addressing will be the options, and then the second, will it not be necessary to complete the actual metering program before the mock building will start?
Absolutely, the metering program completion, we're near completion. The report's gonna come to council. Council will look at those pieces. There's been a motion on the floor for council to continue on. There's probably just some small components of that program that just need to be adjusted, from what I would gather. But that'll be a decision of council and be discussed, and then you're right, Mr. Mayor, that it moves on from there.
Any other further questions or concerns or debates? Okay, so all in favor of that motion? So carried. Again, to our Chief Financial Officer, the 2015 Tax Rates Bylaw 2012.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. This is the 2015 tax rates presentation. Oh, I even have control. All right, so the process, the tax rates process, we began looking at the budget, going through the operating budget back probably November, end of November, mid-November. We're trying to get a little bit earlier every year, get more prepared every year, because it's quite the process. The community charter, section 197, states that each year after adoption of the financial plan, which will happen this evening, but before May 15th, the council must, by bylaw, impose property tax values for the year by establishing tax rates. Tax rates are based on the revised rule released by BC Assessment the last week in March, which was March 25th this year. So it's pretty tight timeline to try and get the tax rates here for April 7th, the beginning, and you'll notice in your bylaw that we have some blank spaces still, because our bylaw for the tax rates includes the municipal tax rate as well as the RDKB and the regional hospital district. The RDKB and regional hospital district don't pass their budgets until March 31st, so they just passed their budget. They'll be sending us their requirements, and then we'll set the tax rates based on that. Based on the conversion ratios given from the province, which I'll give a little bit more of an explanation up here. On the annual tax notice received by taxpayers, the city collects the municipal taxes, but we also collect levies for the regional district, Kootenay boundary, the regional hospital district, school tax, police tax, municipal finance authority, and BC assessment. So I had shown you on the financial plan presentation kind of a pie chart of who we're collecting money for, and of your tax notice, about 40% of the tax notice is actually for the municipal portion, for the portion that the city collects. The rest of it, we collect it and we distribute it to these authorities. So if you take your assessed value from your assessment notice that BC Assessment provides in January, times it by the tax rates, and divide it by 1,000, you'll get the taxes payable, and that'll be your total taxes payable.
We do the math for you though.
Yes, we'll definitely do the math for you. So this is the face of the roll, as they call it. BC Assessment releases this every year. And then there's 2,945 folios behind it that give details on the properties. This is it all summarized into one sheet on the next net taxable values, and this is what we use to set the tax rates. As you can see, total, and this isn't total, this is net taxable, so this doesn't include any of the exemptions. This isn't the gross roll, this is the net roll. Total residential, $364 million was the value for the total residential properties, including vacant land. Utilities, $5.9 million. Major industry, $18.9 million. Down the right hand, for school, for hospital, and general. Some values are different. When we're setting the hospital rates, we'll use the hospital row to set the rates, because there are some exemptions that only apply for hospital properties. Same as the school tax rates. So basically, at the bottom, for general taxation, $456 million. You can see in the general, the first column bottom, $456 million worth of taxable property in Grand Forks.
Are these March 31st?
These were as of October 31st of last year.
October.
October 31st, yeah. So that's usually when the cutoff is for BC Assessment on all of their changes, and then they all have the revised roll out now, and they should be sending they do send assessments usually the second week in January. So these are the tax rates. These were the 2014 tax rates around the region. It's always good to compare what our tax rates are like around the region so that we know if people are looking at this area, we want to be attractive to them in our region. So we've looked at some of the different rates for Cranbrook, Trail, Creston, Midway. The top row is the residential tax rate, even though I made this quite large. Grand Forks 2014 tax rate for residential was 3.8989. And as you can see across there, I believe there's only one other, Castlegar, that's lower. The others range up to 7.3, it looks like. So from about 3.1 to about 7.3. And a lot of that is dependent on if there's major industry that supports the tax base in the city too, and how much major industry and the distribution. So you can see utilities rate. The utilities rate is capped by the province. The highest it can be is the greater of 40 or 2.5 times your business rate. So we're always looking at that to make sure it doesn't go over the greater of those two rates. Major industry, see only 4 in the region have major industry. Trail, Grand Forks, Midway, and Castlegar. You can see what Grand Forks major industry rate is there, which we'll be discussing in a little bit.
Before we move from that, Ms. Shepherd, I think that's one of the most important things that council considers right now is that that number there. It's one that we want to keep in your mind, and also the residential tax rate. You can see where we stand on the spectrum, but the reality for us is some of those communities are actually putting away proper reserves. Cranbrook, in some respect, Roslyn, for their infrastructure, so that's why the rates may be up a little bit because of the asset management planning that they've been doing. But our industrial tax rate is one that we're really going to have to be cognizant of, because it's a way to attract more business, but it's also a way to deter more business. So this is one of the controls that council has, that council sets that rate. You can drive business out of the community. Council sets that rate favorably, and it attracts more business.
All right, so another rate that's always receives a lot of discussion and helped us a lot for our open for business is the Class 6 commercial rate. You can see Grand Forks is fairly competitive in that rate. Recreation and nonprofit and the farm, which are very small amounts when it comes to total taxes collected. So who pays the taxes? We're looking to collect just under $3.1 million in municipal property tax in 2015. Just almost 50% of that will be from residential property taxes. About 2% from utilities. Rec and nonprofit, well, rec, nonprofit, and farm will say 0 because it only does 1 decimal place, and then I believe they're at about 0.1 and 0.2, so it didn't even really show up on the pie chart. Business, just about 20%. Major industry, 28% of our tax base. Okay, I can open the one. So there are 3 options attached to the bylaw for council to consider for the tax rates. Thank you. So the revenue requirement for 2015 is $3,047,841. That is revenue that is required to have a balanced budget as presented in the 2015 to 2019 financial plan that's coming for adoption this evening. So 2014 shows the actual assessments are on the top for 2014. The assessed value was $457 million last year. This year we're at 452 when we take out, you'll see at the bottom that says Section 353 LGA Local Government Act. That's our utilities that pay a 1% grant in lieu. Once you take that amount out, we're at 452 million. Option 1 is to increase the prior year's revenue by 4.96% as per the financial plan, and using the same conversion ratios. So what the conversion ratios, that's how we're dividing up what we need into the different classes. The conversion ratio will tell you, you see down the next step where it says multiple. So the residential on option 1, just with a flat 4.96%, residential increase to 4.0882. And then what you see underneath multiple is known as the conversion ratio, and that says how many times the residential rate is this rate gonna be. So for class 2 utilities, it says 9.78. So the residential rate's 4.0882, times it by 9.78, and then you'll get the utilities rate of 40. So we tried to break it down with the same pieces, same proportion of taxes that all of the rates, and that's what this is, using the same conversion ratios. Everybody that's, class 1 will pay the same proportion of that puzzle, that pie that we showed, 50%. Class 2 would pay the same proportion as last year. However, because we decreased our assessment roll by about 1.5% this year, we have to offset the tax rates 1.5%, well, approximately 1.5% up to offset the decrease in assessment to get the same amount of revenue. So what happened this year, if we set the same conversion ratios, was we ended up going over in utilities, the class 2, over the 40. And I mentioned earlier that there's a cap on utilities rate of 40 or 2.5 times the business rate. Our business rate's quite low, so that works out to about 24. So we can't go any higher than 40. So after I set them the same as last year, same share of the pie as last year, I had to move the utilities rate down to 40 to the cap, and then keep the rest of them the same. So this is what we ended up with on this option 1. Almost the same share of the pie this year. So as you'll see, if we keep going down a little bit, perfect right there, Di, thanks. So that sets our major industry rate, which consists of Interfor and Roxel, to 45.5. Sets our light industry to 11.97, business to 9.77, as you can see from there. So setting that at 45, so in our financial plan, we had stated that part of setting the tax rates would be to look at all of the areas around, all the places in our region and compare. So, Dad, can you just flip back up to the PowerPoint for me? Over to the PowerPoint. Yeah, that's good. So if we flip back here to the third one down, the major industry rate. Can you make it just a little bit bigger? I can barely see that. Perfect. So that would raise our Grand Forks major industry rate from 43 to over 45, which would make us the highest in the region. So just a note on that. Can you go back to the other one now? I wish I had a flip to go from program to program. Excellent, thank you. So option 2. Option 2, it says lower major industry by 25,000. That's actually incorrect, I'm sorry about that. It should say keep major industry rate the same as 2014, because that was the goal in option 2, is to let's set the rates and see what the rates will look like if we try and keep that major industry rate down to 43.39, the same as in 2014. So what it does to the residential rate is it puts it up to 4.16, which is still quite reasonable in comparison to the other rates. It caps the utility rate at 40, keeps the major industry rate at 43, and adjusts the other 3 rates accordingly. So that brings us in exactly, you'll see on the bottom, calculate exactly what the revenue is and from each share. So that brings us in right at our revenue requirements. So then I showed you option 3, which is the exact same tax rates as last year. And just as I mentioned before, because the roll decreased this year, that ends up, if you look down at the bottom at the revenue requirements, we don't meet our revenue requirements for those because the assessment roll has gone down. So we would have to increase those rates to offset the decrease in assessment roll. So these are the 3 options. I am recommending option 2. If there are any questions.
Mr. Allen. Mr. Mayor, I think we know that industry doesn't get a vote at the when it comes to, they can't they don't generally try to express their concerns, but we know that industry provides the jobs in the community, who in turn pay some of the residential taxes in our community. So when we look at what industry pays, I want to be clear that I'm not advocating for industry, but I know that industry plays a big role in how we operate as a local government. They play stewardship roles. They also they pay more than that $43 that you're looking at. The residential tax rate, if they have 100 people working for them, those 100 people, if they're living in the city, there's 100 residential tax notices that are supported by by the income that they get from the industry. it's an important thing for council to consider is the, in some respect, you know, industry has a stewardship and responsibility role to play in the community, but it's also important to nurture and preserve industry, because we know the value of it in our community. When we lost Canpar, we know that the communities, when they go through a process of losing a mill, they go through these processes where they lose their major tax contributor. If you lose one of them, the burden falls onto the residents, unless we generate revenue from somewhere else or reduce our services substantially. But they do play a major role in the revenue that we receive in the community. So that's an important piece for council to look at. So we're shaking.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make the resolution as recommended on option 2. And if I may just put it to what our CEO mentioned, industry pays more than their fair share as far as I'm concerned when it comes to, well, as Mr. Allen put it, but you also got to consider that industry doesn't use our services, or Interfor can't walk into the pool, but they pay for it. Interfor can't walk into the arena, but they pay for it. They pay more than their fair share of a lot of things that they don't benefit from.
And they can't vote.
That's right, and they can't use their parks, and they can't walk down the sidewalk.
And they're both wonderful corporate citizens, both industries, Roxanne and Interfor, so.
Gentleman in the back.
You say that with trepidation. Barry Jarvis, just one quick question if I could. What is our net taxable residential year to year, 2013 to 2014?
Ooh, I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, you'd mentioned a drop of 1.9%.
And that was in the total overall rule. Some of the different classes had changed different amounts. So.
Okay, because I know my personal residence dropped 2.6%.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if residential dropped considerably more than industrial.
No, I don't believe it did, from a general recollection. I can make sure that I have both the revised rules on the website for you so that you are able to compare them on the residential. Like that face of the world that I showed, I could make sure that we have both of them on there so that you are able to compare. There was quite a bit of fluctuation, but so that was an average for all the classes that one.
Okay, that's what I didn't know.
Yeah,
I was just curious as how much our houses actually dropped last year in assessment values.
I'm not sure it's exactly residential. I mean, we would want to break up residential with the property, not vacant land also probably too. But as long as you had those side by side, you would be able to figure that out pretty, a little calculator if you wanted to, and I can make sure it's on the website.
Yeah, it would be interesting to look at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we continue any more discussions, we have a motion on the table for resolution. So all in favor of using option 2? So carried. So now we'll put a motion to refer the first 3 readings with option 2 at the April 20th regular meeting of council. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ross. So now we have a discussion or debate. All in favor? So carried. Now our Manager of Development and Engineering Services. Topic is to amend the current zoning bylaw by rezoning property located at 832 64th Avenue from current R1 single to 2-family residentials to R4 rural residential, and review the sustainable community plan designation to determine if an amendment is required.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, we have received an application to rezone a property located at 832 64th Avenue. It is currently zoned as R1, and the applicant is proposing to have it rezoned to R4, which is rural residential. The city's sustainable community plan has designated this low-density residential. However, if you look here, these properties that are already zoned R4 are also in that same designation. So, you know, would it require an amendment to the SCP? Not in my opinion at this point. So the applicant is proposing to use the property for a market garden, a greenhouse, orchard, hayfield, and he would like to raise some chickens. So that is the subject property. there. That is the zoning. And that is the sustainable community plan designation. That is the property in question right there. And that is the bathroom property. So this will, of course, trigger a public hearing. So council has the ability to give the bylaw first 2 readings and then go to public hearing. This is not something that needs to go to the Ministry of Highways because it's not within 800 meters of a highway. And basically, we're asking committee of the whole to recommend to council to direct staff to draft the appropriate bylaw, proceed with the notification to the surrounding property owners, publish notice in the Gazette for 2 consecutive weeks, and hold a public hearing in accordance with the local government act.
Can I have a motion to that effect?
I'll make that motion.
Councillor Crog, Councillor Shagan, discussion or? Councillor Hammond?
This property, they're wanting to use it as a farm, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But most of the people down there are using their properties as farms.
Yes, except he wants to have a farm, like a crop, which is not allowed in the R1 zone. It's allowed in the R4 zone.
Oh.
Any other questions? Councillor Crog?
Oh, just a comment. There's a lot of land in that area that's suitable for farming, but not a lot of it gets farmed. There's the small, like people have gardens and stuff, and there's a lot of chickens somewhere, and but yeah, they're trying to just follow all the rules and stuff like that. And then it would attach, right? If you go back to the actual zoning, look at it. Yeah. So you can see it's going to attach the R4, so it would just be the brown with a finger going up, and they would utilize that property quite well.
Councillor Hammond?
So the property on the corner that's vacant, it's just a hayfield, is that privately owned or is that city owned?
No, that's privately owned.
Privately? So would it make sense, or is it possible to just rezone that whole corner?
No, so consulting with the owner first, because we don't just generally move along and down zone or change zoning on property without their request.
Councillor Ross?
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused because there is something called urban agriculture. So when anybody within that zone, or it's R1, wants to grow food, they have to rezone instead of just practicing urban agriculture? Because we have a policy, or we have a policy in place about, I mean, I know a lot of people who already have greenhouses and are growing food and have orchards and poultry in the city and are practicing urban agriculture.
Well, he wants to have farm animals, and that's not allowed in the R1 zone. The chickens are not allowed in the single family zone.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that happens when we update our sustainable community plan or our official community plan, and even the zoning bylaw, those are the things that we seek the input from residents, because as time changes, the community evolves. So the community, what Councillor Ross was talking about, is maybe that's just it's a generally accepted statement, but that has to become part of the official community plan or the sustainable community plan. It's just part of our evolution. Maybe years ago people said there's no way in heck that we'll ever have chickens in our neighborhoods. Well, now more people want chickens in the neighborhoods. That's just an evolution. So as we move towards that process, it allows us to obtain information back from residents on how we evolve our sustainable community plan. And that's usually done every 5 years to make sure that we're not being, taking the same mindset as we had several years back. So that may be coming in the next, I think last time we did it was 2011. We may consider doing it again in 2016, 2017. That's generally the best practices.
But we already have chickens in our communities, a few residents that have them, so how does that figure out?
Sometimes they're legal, sometimes they're not.
How do we enforce that?
Well, that comes back down to the bylaw issue, Mr. Mayor, and the practices where we send the bylaw officer. So we get the complaints in for our bylaw process. If we receive the complaints, then we attend the site.
Councillor Hammett and then Councillor Clark.
How does the rezoning of the property into R4 affect property values?
In neighboring?
Well, the owner's property value or in general?
If, Mr. Mayor, if there was a land lift, if there was a greater density, if they were getting more value, then the city would consider that as part of a, you know, we might consider having a, we don't generally go give land lift to properties without the city getting some sort of benefit. Just like a developer wanting to change densities onto a property, they leverage that for instant equity. You know, their property, their value went from something from $10 to $100, and they're just unjustly rich. At the end of the day, what we do is we may have an amended contribution bylaw where we consider those things. What we're doing right now is we're talking about this, and I don't believe there is generally an appreciation in the value from R1 to R4. It doesn't change the density, it just changes the uses. So I don't think that there is an enrichment.
No, I was just wondering if it devalued the property at all by making it agricultural rather than multi-residential.
If they go for farm status after that, they go be class 9, they can improve their farm status and they can get the class 9 status, which does reduce their overall costs. So there is an effect on the community overall if they do get class 9 status, because then they pay less taxes, and then the greater portion of the community has to absorb those costs, as we saw in the tax rates. So our tax rates went from 3.89 to 4.1%. If we lose 1 or 5, there's a ratio in there that'll affect the overall tax rate in the community. So that's why we have general balance in our zoning. But one-offs, they do happen.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, just saying that they're trying to dot the i's and then cross the t's. I have property that's R1 and part of my property is R4. And yes, a lot of people have greenhouses, like a huge part of Grand Forks has greenhouses and gardens, and they produce food. Where the issue really kicks in is once you start bringing in livestock. Yes, there are chickens all over the place, and if they don't bother the neighbors, and nobody ever says anything about them, so we're not going to start a chicken roundup and start sending out a bylaw enforce barbecue. We're not going to do that, but yes, they're asking permission that they can actually legally have chickens, and I can't remember if it's other livestock that can fit into that one as well. So it goes back to the concept of if you're in a subdivision, you're not raising cows and pigs and chickens and disturbing your neighbors, right? So they want you to be zoned for that if you're actually going to be doing the husbandry and all that stuff.
Councillor Wershagen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to point out that we're not voting on this right now. We're just pushing it forward to a public hearing.
So, are there any discussions other than that? So all in favor of the motion? So carried. Again, from our Manager of Development Engineering Services, we're here to amend the current zoning bylaw by adding the permitted use of a tool and equipment rental facility, the I2 General Industrial Zone.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We're looking at adding the tool and equipment rental establishment to the I2 zone. It's currently in the highway commercial and I1 zone. We were just looking, this is more of a housekeeping item. We were just looking more to expand the potential for economic development in that zone. Being that I1 and I2 is so close, it just made sense that it would be allowable as a permitted use in that zone as well. Again, this will trigger a public hearing. We will have to advertise as part of our statutory requirements. We'll also send notification to the surrounding property owners and then have the public hearing.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, just to elaborate a little bit, currently, just an example of what we're looking at here is you can store heavy equipment on the site under the current zoning bylaw, but you can't rent it from there. So you can store as many pieces as you like, as long as they fit on there, but you can't rent them from the site. So what we're doing is expanding those opportunities.
Thank you for your clarification. So may I have a motion? Councillor Verschagen, Councillor Thompson. Any further discussion or debate? All in favor? So carried. We now move on to our question period from the public. Does anyone from the gallery have any questions or concerns? Yes, sir.
Mayor and council, I have a car wash.
You'll be able to identify yourself for the record.
Oh, my name is A. Martins. I run the OK Car Wash. And the way it's built, it needs a piece of equipment to suck the dirt out, and I've had a good relationship with the city, and the city was allowing their men, and I was paying to come and suck it out, and we've had a change of policy, and they don't want to let that happen anymore. Cal from LaFontaine, if you know him, Argosy, he has a piece of equipment and it doesn't do the job. He told me not too long ago when I was talking to him again, is there some way we can get it lowered? He says shovel. Now I'm 68 and I don't like to shovel too much. You know, I don't like to go back into the dark ages. When we have wonderful men at our city and a wonderful piece of equipment, I can't see when we say we're open for business why I can't pay the city to come and so that I'm not shoveling. You know, I've because it's hard to arrange for some of those others, I put dirt on that one back lot, and I don't think that's a proper thing for our city to start stacking dirt on the back lot when we have the equipment to do it. So I would appreciate if we could have a working relationship and be open for business. You know, I was told that we don't have proper insurance or something like that, but you know, the other day I was broken into, and so I came in the middle of the night, 4 in the morning, and I couldn't find him, but I could see he'd been there. So I just got back home to bed, and the alarm went off again. This time, he had tried, the city has a meter there. So he broke into where the meter is, and there's seals in there and everything else like that, and he pulled all these back, and I thought he thought he could get in without having the alarm go off. Well, little did he know, it still went off. So in the morning I phoned, and the city comes, and the city looks after me. They get the meter going, so I'm paying my electricity, so everybody's happy, and so that it can operate. And so it's not as if the city equipment doesn't go on private property and for insurance purposes, and there's men working there. I know that they do that because they've done it for me on some other things where you have something to do. So I don't see why we can't get along. You know, and I don't, you know, I was told to go to Castlegar and hire someone. To me, that's retarded. And I don't like when Cal tells me to shovel. You know, and the city was wonderful in that, you know, Jesse James has a truck, and they said I could use their piping, so I tried that, but his truck is antique. He's Mickey Moused it, and it won't hook onto city piping. So he can't do it, LaFontaine can't do it, and I'm shoveling. And I don't feel that's right. And so I'm asking for the city to give me a little bit of a helping hand. I don't want it for nothing. I never have. And we have the men there. Tell you, I think we got some of the best men. and I've been in Grand Forks for a long time. If I have to shovel a few more years till maybe council changes or something else changes, then I'll be back to, I'm sure the city will again join with me and letting me pay them for their wonderful man, you know, and I've talked with you, right? And I've had the city man, because when I first explained it, he's in charge down there, and he came up and he went with me. We walked in the car wash and I showed him exactly. And he agreed with me. But we as a city have set that policy, and I don't think that all the time we should be doing everything for everybody. But when we have the proper equipment and we have the proper men and nobody else has, I don't think I should be going to Castlegar to get, I think they should make their money over there. They shouldn't make it in Grand Forks. My money should stay here and pay my good men in Grand Forks, so they can keep on coming in my car wash and buying a tire and doing other things in Grand Forks, like helping pay for the arena and everything else. So, I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Martins, for your input and your support of the city and praise for them. Unless I'm incorrect on this, the meter issue is an essential service that the city does have to supply, but doing other services for private businesses falls into different parameters of the city.
It does.
But I will address that to our CAO, Mr. Allen, take it from there, and he'll explain more in detail.
I agree with that too, but I don't expect it when the city's going out and the men are on, usually there's quite a bit of lead time. So when the man's going out there and they've got a little bit of time anyway, I mean, for me to pay him is better than for you to pay him.
No, I understand that, but at the same token, you're just one of many then that would be in a lineup asking for the city's services, at which point when they do have to do their normal work as servicing the city, cleaning the roads, they won't be available to give the full input there. Their maintenance work has to be done for the citizens of the city first and foremost.
Absolutely.
If there was after,
Absolutely.
but if we start that, where does it end?
Well, when it's a specialty thing and no one else can do it, and there's lots of lead time, and they've done it in the past and they tell me they could fit it in now, I mean, why, when they tell me that, are they lying to me?
No, but with all due respect, but then also we're competing with private business. If the city,
Not in Grand Forks, we're not. Because there's no one else in Grand Forks who can do it. I mean, you're competing with a shovel. Me shoveling is what you're doing. And that's going back to the dark ages.
I fully understand that concept. Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city, like you pointed out, the city does have $127 million in assets that we're required to maintain. As we get asked to do these one-off projects, like you pointed out, it takes away from our ability to look after our key projects. What will happen is, we used to do what was called a custom work order, and we were neglecting our own assets. We were looking after privately owned assets. So what happens is we start to look after the private businesses, then we start to crush our own local economy by taking just that one small piece of work away from a contractor. Whether it's a shoveling contractor or an equipment contractor with a piece of equipment, we start to take the ability away from businesses to open up here that would provide these services and support the city. As the city acquires assets and we purchase these things, the city, the taxpayers only buy them to look after the city-owned assets, not privately owned assets. That's a key thing for us to look at here is if we start looking at our city-owned assets for looking after private enterprise, we start to get into a situation where we're providing an unfair playing field for others. And I think the most important thing for us to do is maintain consistency, and that's why we've invoked a practice where we do not compete with private business, and we will look after our city-owned assets first with the city-purchased equipment, and we do not look after private assets, Mr. Mayor.
Well, you came by and looked at the meters and did that. I mean, you came by and you're doing other things. To me, I can't fathom this when I'm a private guy and there's nothing else available and I'm shoveling. you know, and then what happens, because I'm not 100% good, I'm a bit of a lazy bugger too, so I'm not shoveling quite as soon as I should. And so we're getting a little dirt in our city pipes, which I paid for and I put in myself. See, I don't mind, when I built the OK Tire, I paid for the transformers. When I built OK Tire, they changed the transformers. I said, what happened to the old transformers? He says, well, they wore out. I paid for new transformers. I says, well, where are my old ones? Well, they're put to good use. I understand that. I understand helping the city and being together with the city and paying for transformers twice. I can understand that. But I can't understand that when they say they have something and they can't help. That doesn't make sense to me. Then city to me is we're like family. We're trying to help one another. And when I get stepped on instead of being helped, then I say, why am I in this city? I love it. Grand Forks is the most beautiful place. And I'm staying, even if I get stepped on. But I want you to know how I feel. I don't like to be stepped on, and I don't think that's fair. I think we should work together. And I think that's part of the city, working together. I'm not trying to get nothing for nothing. If you have to up the rate on the truck, fine. And I'm ready to pay for good men. Because I know I deal with them and we have real good men. We have a beautiful place, but we want to have that too. We don't want to have it so that I get ticked off and lock the door. Is that what we want? I mean, instead of trying to encourage business, I feel we're stepping on them. And that's not a proper thing. I'm all for private, I'm private, and I'm all for private. But when there's no one else that can do it, and the city has the men and the equipment, and I don't expect them to jump. But when they can fit it in and work together, if we don't believe in working together, then there's something wrong. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Your comments are fully acknowledged. We will. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it just seems, thank you for your passionate plea. Yeah, like from my perspective, it doesn't seem unreasonable. I mean, considering, like we always say, oh, well, what's going to happen? There are people going to be lining up at the door. And I think we can consider things on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we do have some very expensive equipment that we have to look at. We just did our budget. We're looking at repairing equipment that actually needs replacing. And we need to think in the future about these really expensive pieces of equipment that we have that really sometimes does stand idle. And when the gentleman says, you know, when and previously there were times where the work team said, we have this opportunity right now, we can come in and we can get that job done for you. It sounds like this is an opportunity for us to earn revenue to put us into our reserve, which we would use for eventually replacing equipment. And we could put that revenue into reserve. And certainly consider these opportunities on a case-by-case basis. And we don't want to compete with local business. But if there's no local business here that can do that specific job, to me, personally, it does not seem like an unreasonable request.
Thank you.
So well said. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I don't understand what it is you're shoveling, Amy.
Dirt.
But from where?
Well, when you wash your car, excuse me, when you wash your car, it goes into a grid there and there's a holding tank. And so that all fills up with because we as a city are doing a good job sanding the road, and that road from the sanding comes into my car wash, and then it needs to get cleaned out. And so the last few times what I've done is I with a wheelbarrow there and you're filling it in and then you're bringing it to the end, or some of it I roll out onto that back lot that I have there, and I don't like that. But otherwise, Cal says he'll sit there with his fancy machine because it won't fit in outside the door, and he says, you shovel. And I'm running with a wheelbarrow real fast while his fancy, expensive piece of equipment can't get in and do the job. He's sitting there and sucking out by the wheel for it. When the city drives in and there's machine fits right in the doors, and he just goes on and it just sucks it out, just, you know, and it's not required that often. But it's, you know, if you went, the one time, because we discussed that with the city before, and then the chief down there, he came up with another gentleman, we walked in there and I showed him exactly. I mean, it's been a wonderful working relationship.
Yeah, I hear.
But it doesn't, there's too much dirt to do by hand.
You know, I hear what you're saying, but I guess my concern is that if we start something, and then it's a revolving door. Have you considered, rather than doing the shoveling yourself, hiring some youth to come in and do the shoveling and paying them rather than paying the city?
Well, because of the way, when they come, they don't tell you exactly, even Cal, he fits it in and all of a sudden he's there. And so then if don't have somebody there quick, by the time you arrange somebody, you're paying hours for nothing to happen, so.
Well, so that, I mean, can you not coordinate with, you know, and set something up so that it's mutually beneficial both to you, the youth, or the unemployed, and Cal?
No, it doesn't work properly with wheelbarrow. It
I just
doesn't.
have one question, Mr. Martins.
Sure.
Number one, are you referring to the city's sucker truck?
Right,
Okay, secondly, how often a year do you need this done?
maybe twice.
Okay.
It's not that often, but yeah,
Okay, and you're referring to the sediment and sludge?
right, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, one of the things that we would actually have to, because the city did it before, we did it with, I would say, a level of recklessness. We did it because we weren't charging out the proper rates. Our Blue Book rates were cheaper than the private contractor rates. We were actually defeating the contractors in town. The contractors could not compete with us. If we charge our actual rates, based on the depreciation of that equipment, which we're required to do under PSAP, under the law, we're required to amortize that debt, the wear and tear, we pay a mechanic and we put the insurance in. If I was to actually bring the real rate forward, the customer would be actually here talking to you and saying, this is ridiculous the amount of money you want to charge me for this. We have a piece of equipment that we can't even afford to own when it comes right down to it. Based on the actual depreciation and amortizing, which we're going to talk about tomorrow night in asset management, but the reality for this city is that is an incredibly expensive piece of equipment. If we compound the insurance, the depreciation, the wear and tear, the mechanic, the staff time to go ahead and process the invoice, because it's not just going down and processing an invoice. You have a finance department that has to deal with this. We have to add 15% on top of that because we still have to process this through our VADM system, and we have to take it through our whole network. This is not just a drive-through situation where we just drive through and we pay somebody and it's done. There's still the finance department, there's the public works department, there's the records keeping, there's all these other elements to it. So Mr. Mayor, I'm just in respect to this, I would just caution council on proceeding with something like this, because it will be an added staffing component that we'll have to consider, because our staffing levels are also set at our current value and needs as an organization. If we start going outside of this, we have to consider all the departments that are affected. And like you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, it's just this one point, but when does it start, when does it stop? And when do we get to the point where it becomes too expensive for us?
My only comment on that is to address both sides of this issue, the cities and Mr. Martins, and referring to Councillor Ross's statement, and yourself, if there is no private business in the city or close proximity, I would address staff, would we be able to at least put these numbers forward for Mr. Martins to see what kind of cost, and if he would still be interested?
I'm ready to pay the going rate for that truck anytime and the men on it. That's never been a question.
And the second issue would be, how often does the city use that truck, or does it sit idle?
Mr. Mayor, our staffing complement is meant to look after flushing the sewers, for going out and dealing with water situations, fire hydrant maintenance, water main flushes. So there's 4 people on that crew that are looking after $56 million in assets. Their maintenance programs are set. Now, the truck does sit idle. We don't have spare staff kicking around the yard waiting to do extra jobs. What we're dealing with now is diverting some of our maintenance programs to go out and deal with this, because we have to plan the project. There may be staff time allocated to do these things. So, Mr. Mayor, anything is possible, but I'm just going to, if we have to undertake this process to evaluate the actual cost, it'll take this chief financial officer some calculating time and probably some administrative time. So anything can happen at the will of council.
My only concern is because we were just looking at our financial status and we're trying to encourage business and industry to stay by not scaring them away, by lowering the tax rates. But now inadvertently, we have an issue here where we're kind of shunning a person away. And like Councillor Ross said, let's just wait and see if there's a big lineup at the door, for these services. Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Abe, when you built your car wash and
Right.
you had the pit,
Right.
knowing that it was going to be filled, what was your plan to deal with it when you constructed that facility?
Well, I was born dumb. I didn't know all the ins and outs. If you knew everything, I would be God. And I'm far from that. I'm just an average working man, and I never had a clue to that. And so once you shovel it out once or twice, then you start looking around how we can do this, and you can't find anybody, but the city had a machine. And so then when you talk with them, they say that when they're doing their thing, they can fit it in, because sometimes they only have a half a tank. And they gotta clean the truck anyway. So the men are there, the men are available. If I talk to the men, then it's a different thing than when I'm talking to you, because they tell me sometimes they can fit that in. They got elapsed time. And so I'm paying their hours. So either the guys there are giving me a little bit of bullshit, or else it can be fit in when we work together. It's a question of whether we want to work together or not. That's what this is. And I can't see why we can't work together. I mean, I'm paying good taxes. And I don't see, and I'm, like I said, I'm not always the most energetic, so sometimes there's a little extra dirt going in the pipe. I paid for the pipe to go in there too, because the city said you need water and sewer before I even built a car wash.
Councillor Ross has a question, but before I just want to ask you a quick question. How
Sure.
long has the city been doing this service for you?
Well, the car wash has been there about 10 years.
So it's almost grandfathered.
Yeah.
Councillor Ross.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I was just wondering, how long is it, when the city staff are there, how long does this job actually take for them to do the job?
Maybe 2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 hours. Right, okay. Good to know.
I actually told him, I said, you mark the truck down and you come in, I'm buying you coffee, and you keep the truck meter rolling, and I'm paying. I'm thankful for the service, and I'm thankful for the good guys we have here, and I'm ready to pay. But I want to pay the going rate for the truck. I never expect nothing for nothing, and I was even insinuated that I'm trying to cheat the city. Now that's a complete falsehood. When I'm told to shovel and to get somebody from out of town, and that I'm trying to cheat the city, that's not the truth. That's never been.
Well, it's just interesting to know, because if we're trying to determine what the actual real charge or cost is, and it's.
The value of the actual
we
equipment.
need to know how many hours.
Right, the truck has a set rate, all equipment has. And you just,
Anyway.
right?
Okay.
You know what, anybody can figure that out, what a piece of equipment is worth.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm just curious, listening to Abe here talking, and what the staff has said about the actual behind-the-scenes work involved in dealing with this type of transaction. I'm curious if there's any other ad hoc, on-demand services provided to other businesses in the city? Or does the city get regular requests? And if so, could it be that the city could have some sort of ad hoc billing or way of dealing with this that would streamline this and make it possible for the city to help businesses so they don't have to hire somebody from an hour's drive away, that's all.
Mr. Allen.
Mr. Mayor, in 2012, we had what was called a custom work order situation. We were contracting our grader out, we were contracting our sweeper out, we were contracting out our employees on a regular basis, and none of our maintenance was getting done. The process scope crept right out of was basically to the point where we were looking for projects to work on rather than our own maintenance projects. Our staff was to the tune of $15,000 a year to a staff member they were working on extra time, they were doing extra things that the city was paying benefits for. So the overtime that was resulting to our own maintenance of our own projects was starting to creep out of control. That's why we had to stop it, Mr. Mayor. We were at the point right now, we were at the point where our custom work orders were consuming a considerable amount of our time, and I don't know where it started. The situation though was contractors, when somebody makes a purchase of a piece of equipment that's $250,000, nobody's going to do that. But when we found Mr. James bought a street sweeper, we stopped doing that service for the other places that were requiring street sweeping, and then Mr. James's business started to flourish, and he was able to employ people in the community that were creating a more robust economy. Once we were doing it, it was our own employees that were doing it, so they were just consuming everything, and there was no growth in our community. With the purchase of a Vector truck, whether it fits or doesn't fit, there was never an intention to tell the customer that we were going to tell him how to do his business. But at the end of the day, if there's somebody else providing a service and it's not quite right for their needs, that happens every day, whether it's with plumbing services or insulation services or roofing materials. I mean, there's always challenges when somebody's putting a roof on a house or pouring concrete. They buy different pieces of equipment to deal with those things. And it's generally not provided by the city, Mr. Mayor. It's generally provided by outside sources. We have to look after our own businesses first, and I would just encourage council to keep that foremost in the forefront.
My only comment to that is I do agree, and I said originally that we do not want to compete with private business, but having said that, on the same note, if this service does not exist,
Amen.
then possibly we should try to consider.
I think we should be friendly with one another, and when it doesn't happen, I think we should be city, which means family, and we should work together and not worry about whether I don't want no other graders or anything else like that either. I can understand that, but when there isn't, then I think we should work together, and I can't see that why we can't be family. To me, I'm living here, this is family, and that's the way it should be, and I expect to pay.
Councillor Thompson?
Just a couple of things through you to our CEO. There is another car wash in town. Have we had requests from that business to offer assistance in that respect?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's not been going lately, but I don't know how their building isn't long like mine, so it's completely different.
So I guess my second question then is, and frankly, I'm not in support of the city providing these kinds of services, but if the majority of council were to overrule the current policy and change it, would the expectation be from you that you would call up and want the service you would dictate when the services were going to be provided?
It has never been that way, and I don't expect it to be that way. I told them when the city's going, basically when it's getting full, I says, in the next 2 weeks, can you do it sometime? And they've always, when you're got the truck out and you're doing and you got some time, can you fit it in? And that's the way it's been. And I mean, I'm not trying to demand anything. I'm just trying to work together. I mean, isn't that what family's about? Not worrying about You're worrying about your equipment that I'm paying for, and you're saying I might get a penny. To me, that's pathetic. I've paid for that equipment as a taxpayer.
Mr. Mayor?
And when
We
we're
have a
paying
respectful
together,
workplace
then we
policy.
should work.
I just
I
like
mean,
to
when
make sure
there's
we
not,
enforce that.
Mr. Martins?
what's that?
We have a respectful
Yes.
workplace policy, Mr. Mayor, and I
Yes.
think that's an important piece for us to keep in mind here.
Yes.
Nobody should be using that type of calling people pathetic or anything like that in the council meetings.
Please, Mr. Martins, refer.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I don't think that's, you know, I feel like I'm stepped on.
No, you've made your point, that's
Okay.
understandable. Would council want to discuss this any further? or-
I just,
Councillor Ross?
I mean, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what the reality is as our CAO has made clear to us, and I fully understand this, is if the real cost of doing the job becomes outlandish, then it's almost in the other person who owns this equipment and isn't adequate for them to do some retrofit, which maybe is just extending the hose to fit in, you know, like, and pay them a little bit more, and it would be worth their while to retrofit their equipment. I just think that.
I wish that we could all go there and take a look, and then you would understand the situation.
Well.
You know, I've talked to him about that.
Mr. Martins, my advice would be for you to put this all in writing, submit it to the city, and if there's any further need for any, looking into this any further, we'll deal with it this time, but we can't continue any longer on this
Okay.
discussion. Please put it in writing, and the city will respond back.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other discussion from council? Do we have any other questions from the gallery? All right. Oh, sorry, bit leading back.
Sorry to continue this a bit, but Gloria Cook, you as mayor and council and staff, Mr. CAO, and everyone are asking us, residents and taxpayers, to work with you together to make this a better community. And all that it entails, our costs and so on. Who is paying us for our time that we spend here in giving input and the like? You folks get a salary or a stipend. You are asking us for our input, our work. We have other things we could be doing. We could all just go away. You could do what you want. This man is giving you a very good opportunity to work together. The city crews have been seen many times without a job to do, collecting, sitting around. They can figure out their schedules and work it in to give this person a hand. In the future, this may not be needed because if it sells or things are changes are made to the situation that he has, it wouldn't be needed. But this is a work together situation. Why not? And as to considering all the costs, you better think about that one a little bit more. That's not gonna work too well. This area, people have come here, have tried to come here, and they can't afford to live here. It's too expensive. Add all those extra costs, and you're going to get more expense, more rate hikes, more taxes. That's the only way to get it. So we have to keep this down. We have to keep it under control. By doing this process, it's an interesting exercise to see what things cost, but to actually charge for it, where does it stop? And what can people afford? And we want people to move here. When this summer, a comment was found to be made by a person who was coming here considering moving here. They were in a restaurant and they found out that water meters were going in. They said they're going to relocate somewhere else because they didn't like that whole idea because of the extra costs, etc.
What extra costs?
Taxes are high here. People find it expensive to live here, especially for seniors and lower income people. We see this all the time in the line of work we do. So you must keep these things under consideration. We're working together, or we're supposed to be.
Thank you, Ms. Cook.
Thank you.
Still duly noted. We now have from our Chief Administrative Officer, immediately following the committee to whole meeting, council will hold an in-camera meeting. We recommend that we convene an in-camera meeting as outlined under Section 90 of the Community Charter to discuss matters in a closed meeting which are subject to Section 91A, personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. And 91G, litigation or potential litigation affecting municipality. Be it further resolved that the persons other than members, officers, or other persons to whom council may deem necessary to conduct city business will be excluded from the in-camera meeting. May I have a motion for that? Councilor Hammond, Councilor Thompson, all in favor? So carried. May I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Councilor Thompson. This meeting is adjourned.